1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at Soulpot. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I am John Brooks.
And I'm Joey Lewandowski.
Joey, how are you? How are you on this Halloween, on this Monday? Did you get my memo? Did you get the memo that I sent?
Did I get Halloween? The memo? What memo was that?
Send that over to you.
Oh no, I got the memo. I got the memo. I got the memo.
It was trick-or-treating in the office. Do that, I guess. Anyway, happy Halloween, Joey. Today's Halloween, and today we are moving on from spookiness into more existential dread.
Yeah, still spookiness, just a different kind of spookiness.
Very different kind of spookiness this time around than literal mummies and ghosts and bugs and stuff. Today we are discussing 1999's 134th highest grossing movie. A movie slightly less successful than Cookie's Fortune, Chill Factor, and Wing Commander.
I think I've heard of one of those, maybe.
Which one?
I think Wing Commander, but also just might be like so generic sounding that I might have heard of like 10 movies that sound like it.
I can't wait until we do a round of just like absolute trash bombs. Wing Commander is going to be so much fun to talk about, but we're going to have Chill Factor in that round as well. So,
are there any movies from 1999 that you have not seen that you're saving for this show? Like, are there any that you have not seen that you're looking forward to, or is basically everything that you want to see you've already seen?
No, there's a few. I can't think of like off the top of my head. I know that when I've looked over the list a few times, I'm like, oh, I still haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. I'm looking forward to it.
Audition. You said you haven't seen Audition.
I've never seen Audition.
Right. Okay.
There's a couple. Anyway, but this did make more than $150,000 more than a movie that you have covered before that it beat out at the box office. The 135th highest grossing movie of that year was The Astronaut's Wife.
Oh boy, I forgot that was a movie.
Yeah. I'm sure you covered it for your Charlize Theron.
Yeah, it's terrible. I hated it.
It's bad. It's a really bad movie.
Yeah, a lot of her movies are bad. No fault of her own.
This movie's good. Cookie's Fortune is, from what I understand, a very good movie. Certainly got a great cast. Chill Factor is bad, and Wing Commander is super bad. So it's an interesting little sandwich that we find this movie in. Anyways, you might ask why in the first two rounds we are talking about a dismal box office failure. Well, today's movie stars Ron Livingston, Jennifer Aniston, David Herman, Ajay Naidoo, Dietrich Bader, Stephen Root, Gary Cole, Richard Reel, and John C. McGinley. It's the directorial debut of Beavis and Butt-Head creator Mike Judge, based on the 1992 animated short of the same name. Today, we are talking, appropriately, on Monday, about Office Space. Joey.
Yes.
What's Office Space about?
It follows a software company leading up to the Y2K code switchover and a handful of employees who hate their lives and hate their jobs. And the company brings in some consultants to save the company some dollars. And these guys are about to get laid off or promoted, depending on who you talk to, decide to rip off the company for a lot of money in the style of Superman 3. But mostly it's about people who hate their jobs and don't want to go to work anymore, or just want to go to work and not think about anything. Basically, it's just about, general malaise. Again, I feel like the pre-Y2K was a lot about like tech paranoia and just general malaise.
Yep.
I will also say, I will spoil right now, this is, I think, maybe the only movie that we're going to cover that could challenge The Matrix for my favorite movie this year. Like, I love this movie so much. This is
interesting.
Like, I think this might be the funniest movie of all time.
Wow. Well, you've certainly previewed the conversation we're going to have later on. Then,
I'm just dropping, teasers to keep people engaged to the second half.
interesting. I'm looking forward to talking more about this. Anyway,
Because you hate this movie.
I don't. I do not hate this movie at all. But I also I have a lot of different feelings about this
Okay.
movie. But I don't hate it, and we'll get to that later on for sure. But I'm really fascinated to know that this is like your second favorite that we have covered all time. But again, it was a giant disaster of a movie at the box office. Office Space was released during the hot box office month of February, when all of the great blockbusters go to die. On February the 19th, 1999, and debuted at its highest box office ranking of
I'm going to guess 12.
8th.
Okay.
Pretty bad.
Not good.
That week's box office was led by the Nicholas Sparks adaptation Message in a Bottle, followed by Mel Gibson's Payback, My Favorite Martian, Shakespeare in Love, which came out in 1998, October Sky, the other Brendan Fraser movie, Blast from the Past, and She's All That, in what was the 7th worst box office week of the year.
How many of those other top 7 or bottom 7 weeks were in the first, 7 weeks of the year? Probably a lot of them, right?
It's interesting. So there's a couple of them down there. So like late January through mid February are always notoriously terrible box office
Well, not
times.
anymore. Not since Black Panther and Get Out were like, "Oh, we can put movies in February that people wanna see if they're good movies."
Well, all the rules have changed now. I'm surprised when a movie's like in theaters now. I'm like, ooh, fancy. Like, oh,
Yeah, that's true.
you're putting that in a movie theater? Like, what? Okay. Yeah, no, but back in the day, the old rules are that that's where you put a dud to die. I looked over it, so some of the worst times, pretty predictable. You got like early in the year, late January, early February, so after Oscar season, essentially, right, where a lot of the worst movies are put out. Then you have like right after summer movie season, so you have like late August is pretty bad, and then you have like late fall tend to be the worst times. So before they roll out sort of the Oscar bait
Yep.
around early winter, and then after the sort of doldrums of the summer season.
I mean, I
Um,
understand logically, those are just maybe times, people don't go to the movies, but it also feels like those are ripe opportunity like we talked about with, The Mummy picking and choosing its spots, not
yeah,
knowing that The Matrix is gonna be a hit, but knowing that Phantom Menace is gonna be,
yeah.
slotting things in. It feels like if you have a movie that, you need eyes on it, put it out in a blank spot. But it had to have happened. It just didn't work, I guess, but still, it's wild to me.
Well, I'll get to it in a second, but one of the problems with this movie is that from the marketing standpoint, it was a complete disaster. So this
Well, I
was
don't know
a
how you
lot of
sell
it.
this movie. I have no idea how you sell this movie.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll get to that in a second. But it was filmed for $10 million and made just a tiny bit more than that during its run. So it was technically profitable by like a few $1,000s, which is not great. It's safe to say that this is, among all the movies that we have covered, the only one that's an unmitigated legendary box office disaster. So what exactly went wrong? Speaking of all of that we were just talking about. Well, first thing, again, as we just said, is timing. Office Space is very obviously, to anybody watching it now, a summer movie.
Well, I mean, it's set. I don't know if it's ever explicitly said, but it's set in Austin because everything Mike Judge does is set in Austin, basically,
Yeah,
right? And
right?
that's what February looks and feels like. I
Oh,
believe. I
sure.
mean, to the rest of the country, under 3 feet of snow, maybe not, but you know, most of the year looks like this in Texas.
Oh, I agree with that. But in terms of the vibe of this movie, like, this is not what people want to see in February. Like, this is not the mood of the country, right? Like, this kind of movie plays and for very different reasons, but like plays to the same audience as like American Pie. This belongs in like a late July, early August kind of release. It doesn't. When I see movies in February, like they are like either sort of like big sort of dark epics, right, or like low key dramas. This just does not fit into um, what you expect to see in that time. So like when you look at movies like Message in a Bottle, right, which is like this, you know, Nicholas Sparks kind of, you know, weepy date movie. Payback, Mel Gibson, which is this like gritty, low budget sort of action movie.
Was that in '99? Are we going to do that one?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
99. October Sky, which is like a very sort of like low key drama. It's a great movie. I'm looking forward to that one as well. Blast from the Past, rom com, right after Valentine's Day, right? She's All That, same thing. Like this just doesn't fit to that period. So it's pretty obvious to me. Like this was a movie that nobody believed in. They dumped into a place to sort of like let it come and go, and it's just all the timing is all wrong. Um, I think, but that's I think the first problem. The second one is that while the cast is unambiguously amazing, its two stars don't make a ton of sense. So Livingston is a terrific actor, and I love him in pretty much everything he does, and he plays the straight man in like this absurd world very, very perfectly, right? He's got that great like ability to connect to an audience in a world of crazy stuff happening around him. But he was the best known as like the one of the other guys in Swingers, right?
Right. Yep.
Which like that was his resume, which was itself a beloved but like minor indie hit. So it's not like you're banking on Ron Livingston to sell your movie. And the other major star was Jennifer Aniston, who, performance aside here, really made no sense in this movie at the time. Like she was still a star of the biggest sitcom on earth, but she was like struggling to find her place as a movie star. And this didn't really help. And like if she was a draw, she wasn't a draw for the sort of audience that Office Space was seeking.
I feel like to her point, like I don't think she still has found her movie niche.
No, never. She
Which
never
is
did.
wild because she is one of the most famous actors, I think, probably of all time, specifically just only for Friends.
So weird.
And if you think of like movies she's been in, it's like, okay, it's The Good Girl, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
only maybe known because like she like briefly gets topless. And then there's like We're the Millers.
Yep.
And like
Yep.
I'm sure I could come up with more, but I would be hard pressed to come up with a fourth movie because it just feels like it's Friends and like end of list,
Mm-hmm.
which is wild. Although almost did I know that like other Friends are more successful. But, like none of the Friends have really been anything more than the Friends.
Um.
Is that fair to say? Like Courtney Cox has Scream.
Yeah, Courtney Cox
Phoebe
has Scream and
Lisa
Cougar
Kudrow has a lot
Town,
of
which was
comedy
pretty.
stuff.
So I think Kudrow I think has done a bunch of stuff that she wants to do. Right.
Yeah.
I think she's done the career that she wants. I think the same's true of Schwimmer. I think Schwimmer's basically been able to kind of do whatever he wants and has done some like cool, interesting, creative things in that time.
He did the People versus O.J. Simpson where he plays Rob Kardashian.
Yeah, really well, by like creepily well.
He has been my fantasy baseball team icon for 7 years now. In that role.
So I think he and Kudrow, who were both kind of the ones who were not cast as the kind of like hot ones, right? They're sort of like the weird, sort of geeky friends. So that kind of makes sense. Matt LeBlanc has certainly like done some interesting stuff in the meantime. Like not at all what I think his trajectory seemed like it was going to be, but sort of has done his own thing.
And Matthew Perry just has a string of failed sitcoms.
Yeah, that's basically right. And I guess Studio 60 was probably the closest thing he came to something that worked. But yeah, Jennifer Aniston is mostly famous for being famous at this point. Like she's famous for like doing makeup commercials and like not being pregnant, and like that's pretty much it. So I agree. She never really found her spot in cinema. And I mean, we'll talk about it later, but I think she's good in this movie, but it was like, this is not like who is this for? Like
so that's the other thing, and we'll get into this when I don't know if I should say this now, but like there's no reason I should have loved this movie as much as I did when I saw it. Because I saw it for the first time, like unlike everything else that for this podcast, I saw this movie when I was like 15, and there's no concept a 15-year-old has about like hating work. Like I had my first job, like it was like it didn't equate. So I don't know why I love this. I hadn't really seen Beavis and Butt-Head or King of the Hill or anything like before this, so I had no like affinity toward Mike Judge. I don't know why it struck a chord with me. I don't know who this is for really, but I think there's just like I mean, now it was a box office bomb. Like this is like a beloved cult classic now, right?
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
we'll get to that. Yeah, I agree. Like I was a huge Beavis and Butthead fan and loved King of the Hill. I had no interest in seeing this movie. I didn't even really connect that it was Mike Judge. And again, I'll talk about that in a second, right? Because this was so badly marketed, like astonishingly badly marketed that wasn't even a draw for me. So it's hard to see how your average audience would be like, yeah, I want to see that movie. And when you look at the rest of the cast, again, they're all brilliant comic actors, like across the board. But even easily the most recognizable name among them was Dietrich Bader, who played Oswald in the Drew Carey Show. You know, and you can't really sell a movie on Stephen Root and John C. McGinley and Gary Cole to anyone except me. So like, it's just, like, what's the angle? Like, who is this for?
And that's the
I
other
think
funny
we'll
thing is
see.
that like they've all gone on to like success. Like I don't think you can say that anybody like really flopped, but like none of those are really household names.
No,
Like
no,
Gary Cole is
they're
just
my
like
names.
one of the 10 very funny people in Veep, right? And like
Yeah,
John C. McGinley is like one of the 10 very funny people in Scrubs. It's just like they're not like it's weird how this like nobody broke out of this, but it's still I don't know. It's wild.
McGinley was well known in like, you know, Second City circles.
Yeah. Hmm.
Root was obviously famous for news radio, but news radio was like the kind of show that this movie appeals to, like that sort of audience. And like, it's not, you have to be a big news radio fan at that point to know who Stephen Root is, and like I certainly did, but certainly not most of the people that I knew did.
Well, when
And
you said that this was based on like an Office Space short, I thought it was based on like Milton shorts. Wasn't Milton the central character, or was he just the central character of the original Office Space shorts?
Yeah, he was the central character of The Office Space. There
Okay,
was a short film that Judge did called Office Space that was like an
gotcha. Okay,
animated
okay, I
film
haven't
that he
seen that.
did.
Okay,
And
is
then I
that
think
like
he did a
is
bunch of
that
shorts for
gettable? Like,
like,
is that out there?
yeah, it's out there somewhere. And I
Okay,
think he did, I don't quote me, but I think he did shorts for Liquid Television as well
that
around the same
sounds
time.
right.
Because Beavis and Butthead also started in the same venue. Yeah, I love Gary Cole. Like, Gary Cole's one of my favorite actors of all time. And like, he's so great in this. But like, even when I finally did see this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, nobody would see this. Like, what's the draw? Like, what's your angle in? I don't really understand why anybody would go out of their way to spend money to see this movie. And lo and behold, they didn't. So Mike Judge himself actually criticized the marketing quite a bit, including the very ambiguous poster, which depicted a guy covered in Post-its, and presented the movie as a generic comedy that just kind of made jokes about modern work life, like, say, Dilbert, which
Yes.
we'll get more into in a second. I found this fun nugget directly from Wikipedia. I'm going to quote from the Wikipedia Office Space entry here. Quote, the studio also had a man live in a plexiglass cube above Times Square for 5 days. It was broadcast live on the internet as he answered calls and emails from people dissatisfied with their jobs.
So not David Blaine, or is this David
Great
Blaine?
marketing. Oh, it goes on. Livingston, when he visited the cube for press events, found that most reporters prefer to talk to the man in the cube and not him.
That's pretty sad.
He was not surprised as tracking for the movie was not good, and, quote, there was a foregone conclusion that it wasn't going to open well. Producer Michael Rotenberg elaborated that, quote, it took a few research screenings to realize that audiences often have issues with satire. So that's from Wikipedia. Yeah, they did like a David Blaine thing.
Hmm.
And again, it's like, that to me is the ultimate, like, if you had to make a movie about someone being clueless about how to sell a movie, like, you should make a movie about someone trying to sell Office Space. Because, man, how stupid do you have to be to sell this movie? Like, it's not that hard.
Well,
I
I
don't
feel
think.
like that's just like what Mike Judge does, because like he would later go on to do that movie Extract, which I can't even
Yeah,
describe what it's about because like it's not
right.
about anything. It's just like,
No.
what is this about? Like about flavor extracts? Like why is there a whole movie about this? But like
Well,
it's
that's
also
different though. That's different because Office Space makes perfect sense,
oh
especially
I
in the
know.
time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how can you not sell this? I get that there's no stars. I get that Jennifer Aniston is like a supporting role in it, that she's obviously the biggest name by far, but like, and that you're not trying to sell this to Jennifer Aniston fans. I get all of that. But
I
at the same
feel
time,
like
it's like,
from
it's
what I
not that hard.
remember about the marketing of this movie, I feel like I remember the opening scene where he's in the car
Mm.
and the guy in the walker is walking by, and I remember thinking
Yeah.
that was funny, but I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know how do you build a movie around this because that almost feels like a cold open. I mean, it is a cold open, but like it feels like a different thing that like isn't part of the movie. I mean, it is, but it's not. And like, I don't. It doesn't sell a movie; it just sells like a tone.
Have you seen the trailer recently? Like, did you
No,
watch it? Okay,
no.
it's like it's not it's bad. Like, it's just bad. It just doesn't sell the movie at all. You're gonna watch it right now? Watch it right now.
I'm gonna watch it right now on mute while you talk because I remember vaguely because like I feel like the things that are memorable about this are like white guys listening to rap. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's things that like they don't lend themselves well to trailers, like to short bites. Like there's nothing like memorable. Like there's no action, there's no
I think
special
that's it.
effects.
Yeah.
There's no real like laugh lines. Like I think this movie again is hilarious, but like there's not like a single joke you could point to that like would get like a theater cracking up that doesn't know the movie, right? So
Yeah, I think that's also partly it because so the other thing that I think was working against this movie was Beavis and Butthead, which at the time Beavis and Butthead had ended about a year and a half before this movie came out. And at the time, it was still not quite understood, I think, in the broad culture as being great satire, which it definitely is. I mean, like if you go back now and look at it now, like it's brilliant satire of a certain kind of 1990s culture. But it still had this reputation, I think, in the mainstream culture of being sort of this like crass thing that like convinced this one kid to like light his trailer on fire or whatever it was, right?
yep,
Like, all that sort of thing. And that it was not this idea that like Beavis and Butthead was not in on its own joke and that people didn't really understand Mike Judge's satire. And I think because Beavis and Butthead and even King of the Hill, that while both of them were admired by real critics of comedy as being like great works, I don't think that that message had really permeated the popular culture at the time to give Mike Judge enough clout to make Office Space work and like to sell it to people, right? Like, here's this guy that you love from these two great animated series making this live action movie about office life. I think that sort of played against it as well. Like the Beavis and Butthead hangover, I think sort of is part of what's going on here. And also, like, as you were just saying in relation to the trailer, Beavis and Butthead's comedy like doesn't really work in small nuggets, right? In like you need the full context to like understand why it's great satire. And
right.
if you try and like clip it down into the most sort of salacious elements, then you're not going to understand that. So no, I think that's absolutely right. I get why this didn't work, like why this bombed, right? I don't think it had to. Is the thing. I just think that if there was some better marketing minds behind it, it would have been fine.
I feel like this is a movie that would have done better in like a social media era, like where you have different types of like I just don't think it's a movie that was made for
Yeah,
1999, right? Like it's ahead of its
but it
time.
absolutely was as well, right? It's
Right.
like that's the
Yes.
weird thing, right? It's like fully of its time, but you're right. Um, in terms of selling it, you could do it a lot more with what the tools that you have today, for sure. Um, anyway, the bottom line is that Office Space failed and people missed it the first time through. Like, just people did not go to see this movie in theaters. Um, however, it did pretty well with critics. So it has an 80% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes with 102 reviews and a 93% audience score. It's got a 68 rating on Metacritic and a 6.6 audience score there. Funny enough, going back to a previous episode, the highest rating on Metacritic comes from our old friends, TNT Rough Cut,
Our
who get
boys and girls and non-binary pals.
and whoever the hell is
I would
writing
imagine though
whatever.
TNT Rough Cut is probably most of dudes, a bunch of dudes.
Both names that I found so far seem to definitely be dude names, and I don't know what this thing is, but for whatever reason, they love Office Space so much that they come up
Good.
first
Cool.
on Metacritic, so good for them. But of the major critics who reviewed it positively, the Hollywood Reporter's Michael Rechtschaffen, I think that's right,
Sure.
Rechtschaffen, Michael Rechtschaffen, who wrote, quote, "Forget Dilbert. The
Forget
true
Dilbert.
forget him. The true comic king of the cubicle hall has arrived in the form of Office Space, marking Mike Judge's live action directorial debut. An extremely funny white collar satire filled with enough delightfully askew characters to pack a boardroom and the bright talent to do them justice. The picture should strike an achingly familiar chord with 9 to 5ers the world over." Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars, concluding, quote, Judge, an animator until now, treats his characters a little like cartoon creatures. That works. Nuances of behavior are not necessary because in the cubicle world, every personality trait is magnified, and the captives stagger forth like grotesques. There's a moment in the movie when the heroes take a baseball bat to a malfunctioning copier. Reader, who has not felt the same? And Anne Hornday in the Baltimore Sun wrote, quote, imagine a live action version of Dilbert.
Yeah, that feels like the easy comparison to make.
A lot of these reviews mention
Yeah.
Dilbert. it's
What's that
Dilbert.
other one thing set in an office that's ever been made? Dilbert.
It's the one thing in the late 90s set in a tech office
Yep.
that satirizes the tech office. But the creator of Dilbert sucks a lot, and Mike Judge is awesome. So that's the, like, you could not find a wider gap between human beings than Scott Adams and Mike Judge. So fuck Dilbert. But she goes on to say, or in the company of men reconceived as a light-hearted romp, and you get the idea of Office Space, the auspicious live-action debut of Mike Judge. And then our old nemesis, David Edelstein, also praised the movie, but wrote a little bit more of a reserved review, saying, quote, a take this job and shove it movie about the crushing malevolence of the corporate environment. It's on the verge of being pretty good.
On the verge of being pretty good is a
Oh,
pretty
sorry.
damning sentence.
Let me say again. It's on the verge of being really good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, still, that's not really a compliment.
But he goes on to say that it peters out without a decent payoff. It's a testament to the rage and anxieties that he is brilliantly tapped into, that he can't get away with a subdued conflagration and a lame twist at the end. But of the detractors, Empire Magazine's Ian Nathan wrote, quote, irritatingly, as fertile a target as it is, Mike Judge's film is shapeless, his characters wishy-washy, and his jokes caught ineffectually skirting realism.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. Like, I guess that guy just didn't get it.
I guess, and I do, like, again, like, I have criticisms of this movie, and if I align with one of them, it's the Edelstein one. I think when this movie soars, it really soars. I think when it's at its best, it is incredibly good. It is one of the best comedies ever made. I just don't think most comedies can last 90 minutes. and this one comes in at 89 and it almost gets there, but I really feel like it falls apart in the third act. But again, we'll talk more about that later on. Anyway, like the other relative failures that we've discussed in the first round of this podcast, Office Space found a home on the video market, where frankly, it made a lot more sense. It was released on August the 31st, a much better time for comedies, and catching the tail end of the summer movie season when people are much more likely to want to watch movies at home. It sold 2.5 million copies by 2003, and at that point had become a staple on Comedy Central, where airings of it continued to provide good ratings for the network. Anyway, not to overuse the overused term cult classic that you mentioned earlier, but this really has become one, inspiring a lot of revisionist reviews from outlets that initially dismissed it and appearing on a number of best of lists since. It's been quoted and memed to death, which really is the true sign of a cult classic. This movie, I realize now, I think has a lot more in common in terms both of its life commercially and thematically to Fight Club than I ever realized.
Yeah, for sure.
Before now, I just think this movie is a movie, like, in the same way that we kind of talked about the way that Election and American Beauty are sort of going after the same things in a lot of ways. This is sort of the Election version of Fight Club, right? Where, like, there's a lot of the same themes here, and
like the narrator's pause talking about the corn. Can we get that in Cornflower Blue? It's like that's the TPS reports of the Fight Club world.
Yes, like the meaninglessness of the corporate world, and like the male malaise, and I think the way that it explores ideas of masculinity are very different. But like, you could watch these in a film class back to back, and like, assign a good paper, right? for your students, that would make a lot of sense. So anyway, I'm looking forward to getting into it. All right, the question is, does it still hold up? Is it still good? Would people today, is it a movie of the time, or do its internet age workplace malaise jokes only work in context? Well, since its only female lead is a well-known Jennifer, we knew just who to ask. So Joey, who is our guest today?
Today's guest is writer, podcaster, and co-host of Too Many Jennifers, Jenn Tisdale.
We'll be right back with Jenn Tisdale.
I was just listening to the Blair Witch episode as a Maryland girl.
Yeah.
I need you to understand, as I'm sure you discovered, that we really were like, maybe this is real.
Yeah.
Because the internet, of course, they did it. They fooled us and then never again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very scary.
That was a wild thing. But like we were like, oh, the web is a thing that we can access and do, and it's cool that we have this website that we can go to for this movie that like gives us information. Like that was the wheelhouse was like us, right? And it's really hard to explain how effective that was to anybody who, like, even though I think I knew it was fake, but I was like, but there's a website.
But what I'm saying is we weren't really sure. We were like sitting in this old theater in Maryland thinking, I don't know anything anymore. I don't know anything anymore.
Yeah.
Now I know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, part of the appeal of that movie is that it keeps convincing you to like pretend that you don't know it's real. Mm-hmm. And like it's so effective at that. But
okay, so sorry. It's your show. Take it away.
No.
Did you leave in the 6 minutes of soccer talk before?
Oh no, I did not. Last week we had Chris Cluey on for our last
That's
episode.
For the Patreon. Soccer talk is for the Patreon.
I asked one question.
Chris and I talked about soccer for 8 minutes before we started.
I said, Chris, did you ever play a football game in England? He's like, no, but I wish I did because of soccer. And then for 8 minutes, he talked about soccer. And I was just like, sorry. Sorry, Sean, who edits this?
Now, was it 1999 soccer or just regular?
No, it was Now Soccer. It was about now. Yeah.
Football.
It was football. Chris is an NFL legend. And so we talked about soccer, of course.
I think legend is a strong word. I think he's more legendary off the field than on the field. But
he's a legend, and he played for the NFL.
True.
These two things are true at the same. Yeah, true at the same time. Anyhow, Jennifer.
Yes.
Welcome to 1999 the podcast. 1999 the podcast.
Thank you
with
for
John
having
Brooks
me.
and Joey Lewandowski. It's great to have you.
I'm not the only one who can't say this year, right?
You can't. You don't remember the year. I can't say it.
How old are you? Please, just tell me.
I'm 34, so I was 11 for most of 1999.
Right. I remember where I was at age 11.
Yeah,
you weren't too.
I was playing video games. I just wasn't watching movies.
Part of the podcast, Jen, is that like he didn't see any of these movies when they came out. He saw them in college when they were like films that were, highfalutin.
Well, I will admit to you that in 1999, I was half in college, half out of college, and not watching movies as much. But this movie that you'll introduce, I think, is a movie that makes more sense for later in life anyway. I doubt very seriously I would have really found it that funny.
Well, that's what I was teasing the intro. I don't know why I loved it as much as I did when I saw it, but we will get to that.
Hold that thought, because that is a big part of like this movie's legacy. Jen, you have so Joey, like when you're listening to podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're like, you'll hear the hosts say their names, and they're like, "Hey, I'm Nick," and someone's like, "I'm Jen." And you're like, "Oh, Jen." Like that's a good name for a podcast host, right? How many Jens are normally in a podcast, do you think?
I don't know, but you're also asking someone who's co-host on many, many episodes is also named Joe. So I think that I am right there. It's likewise company. Even though Joe is, I think, a much more common. Well, maybe not. I feel like for girls of the 80s and maybe the 70s and whatever, there's a lot of Jens, but Joe is also very, very common. But no, I think 2 is the appropriate number of Jens for a podcast.
It's the appropriate number. That's interesting, because the recommended daily allowance of Jens for a podcast is 1.
Oh, God.
And if you've got more than one Jen, You have too many Jennifers.
I have to be nice because I've only met Jennifer just now. So
You don't have to be nice. You will.
I do think that there
I'm
should be
certainly.
two.
I'm
I
not
think
going
there
to be
should be
nice.
two.
Jen, you host a Jennifer-themed podcast
I do.
called Too Many Jennifers, which has
There
you
are.
and another Jennifer talking about Jennifer stuff
Too
and
many.
other stuff.
Have you talked about Jennifer Aniston?
Not yet. We're trying to keep it
doing that today.
a little deeper. Yeah, so
Yeah.
technically, this is a big crossover episode, and I just didn't invite my co-host, which is classic Tisdale.
We're gonna have
We're
her.
talking
We're gonna
in the
have
intro
her
about how
on.
Jennifer Aniston has never really become like she's friends. She's Rachel, and she's only Rachel, and like she has not really broken past Rachel.
Well, I'm happy to talk about the one motion picture she was in before she made this motion picture.
Oh,
Because
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre one.
No, not that. That was you're thinking of Rachel Zellweger.
Oh shit, you're right.
You're thinking of Leprechaun.
Leprechaun. Yes. Okay. Yeah,
And I'm not
sorry.
even counting that one.
Damn.
I'm counting in the same vein as this one.
You got
but go
me.
ahead.
You got me. We're gonna have both Jennifers on at some point. But I feel like we need to ease our way into Jennifers because you can two is too many.
Well, we're the podcast that's too many Brians.
True, but not at the same time. We'd have ended two Brians on at the same time. That would be madness.
And we've had like 5 episodes with a Brian. We had like 3 in a row with a Brian. And not even by design, just by accident.
I hear that you can't have 2 Brians in the same place at the same time. It's like Superman and Clark Kent.
You also can't
it blows up the universe. It's like if Marty McFly meets himself, like
Here it is. You're the doc.
Yeah. Tell us about Too Many Jennifers. It's a Jennifer themed podcast.
Yeah,
but it's not just for Jen. Like if my name's not Jennifer, we're close. We're John and Joey. We're J names.
Mm-hmm.
We're all J names here, but like not Jennifer's. So like, what's in it for us, Jennifer?
Well, we say that we are the podcast by Jennifers for everyone, nice. And it is. There are too many. It is upsetting. Although every time we interview someone, they quickly tell us that they don't know any Jennifers, and I'm like, I'm glad this name is dying out. I find this name to be an albatross, and I can't stand it. And when I was younger, while working at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, plug.
Nice.
I was like, you may call me Guinevere. What an asshole. Sorry. And, so I hate my name. My co-host loves her name. And every episode is Jennifer themed either via a guest or we really shoehorned in some of them every once in a while. Like maybe the name Jennifer will be like whispered once in the wind of something. And we're like, that's enough.
That's it.
Or we'll do something like another podcast crossover. A friend of mine named Henry is on a podcast called Last Podcast on the Left.
Yeah.
And he is a big UFO expert. So I had him come on while I talked about a Jennifer who had been abducted. And I used him
there it is.
is this what normally happens in abductions, Henry? Like, so while he's not a Jennifer, he's an honorary Jennifer. We'll have an expert, a non-Jennifer expert, come on and react to a Jennifer-themed story.
Unidentified flying Jennifers.
Yes. So that's kind of how it is. And, obviously we've done Jennifer's Body. So we're all, so all of those sorts of things. It's very all over the place. It's all over the place, truly. It's fun, but we're not as consistent about putting our content out because we are old women who are tired. I'm an ancient crone. So,
yeah, I don't really know how we've pulled this off so far, but somehow we have done it, even though I go to bed 2 hours before we are currently recording right now. So Joey, this may be some relevant context to you. Jen and I are the same age, and
gross.
when we were, I won't say what that is, but like when we were young, so there were 2 names. Jen's probably true of you as well. You know how like when you're in a kindergarten, when you have like 2 or 3 of the same first name kids, you got to have the first initial. So it's so like for me, first, second, third grade, it was always like Jenny G, Jenny H, Jenny K, like et cetera, et cetera. And the other one was Kelly and Jenny. You had to have the first initial because I had more than one in each of my classes for like most of elementary school.
I'm friends with at least 4 Jens, but I don't know if I'm friends with any Kellys.
Well, it's also like I'm from New England where it's like Catholic. So lots of Kellys.
Irish.
The Irish Catholics. But I haven't heard of a Too Many Kellys podcast. So,
well, I mean, I would obviously have to sue them for some sort of light plagiarism.
Sue them for Alex Jones money. $1 billion.
Almost $1 billion.
So beautiful. Love it. We're here to talk about Office Space. Joey and I talked about Office Space a little bit in the intro and gave a few Jennifer-related tidbits about Jennifer Aniston and where she was in her career and where she is in her career today. But we usually start the show by asking our guest what the first time experience of seeing Office Space was. Jen, I'm gonna guess, because if you're like literally everybody else in America, you did not see this movie in theaters.
No.
And
Did
saw
it
it
have a
somewhere.
wide release? Do you know? Because this
It
doesn't feel
sure
like a wide
did.
release to me. Wow.
It
Because of
did.
the Aniston of it all, I assume.
And nobody went to see it.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So when did you see it?
I can't tell you exactly when in terms of a year, but I know that I saw it by the time I had already worked in an office. So it must have been in the early 2000s, because in the 1999s,
Yeah,
this came out in February, I believe.
it did.
Okay, great.
19th.
February
Yep.
16th or 19th? Sorry, 4 days before my 19th birthday.
Nice.
And at that time, I was in and out of college, as I said. And then here's a fun 1999 fact for you. Later that year, I would begin dating a man in a very 90s band called the Bloodhound Gang.
What?
Sure did. Sure
Nah.
did.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah.
Like the
something
Discovery
about
Channel.
animals and boobs.
Yes.
Yep. That's
Heard about
them.
it.
Everyone's like, oh,
Oh,
the
fuck.
booby guys. I'm like,
That's
it
the
was
ones.
just as true in the bedroom as it was on the album cover. So, good for them.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
nice to be consistent. I only tell this, this is not a brag. Please, God, nobody think like, look at this bitch
I'm
bragging
just
about.
excited that my 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to the Bloodhound Gang is now 1.
You're welcome.
One
And
degree.
mine
It
is,
was question mark before. I didn't think I could get there, but now I can get there in 1.
I never got there. So, I only say this because the year in the early 2000s, I then moved to Los Angeles, and my movie watching and movie going, believe it or not, even though I lived in Los Angeles, drastically dropped because I
Yeah, who
just
goes
had
to
no
movies in
money
Los
ever. Well, I
Angeles?
just had no money.
Yeah, no culture there.
So
for that.
I believe I probably saw this in the mid 2000s,
Wow. Okay.
like 2005
Wow.
on the nose.
John, I
probably.
finally beat a guest to the
You
movie
did.
we're talking
Congratulations. That's amazing.
about. Thank you so much.
I mean, I could be lying because I have a terrible memory, but I remember connecting to it in a way that tells me I had already been working in an office and could understand everything that was happening on a visceral, rage-filled level, which even though I don't work in an office anymore today, still got it. Still got it. I watched it, and all those fabulous feelings just came rocketing back into my goddamn body, and it was like I never left. So thank you. I watched it this morning just to get it real in there. In there.
Yeah.
You know what? I just realized, sorry, not to completely change the subject, but this started, speaking of rage-inducing moments, John always starts the episodes by asking me a question, and he threw me off because he said, "Did you get the memo?" And while I was watching the movie, I thought the question was going to be, what would you do if you had $1 million? And so I had an answer to that queued up, and then he asked me about the memo, and I'm just like, wait, no, what? So I dropped the ball, but I was expecting a question, but I got the wrong question. So I just realized why I was so disarmed.
Joey.
Yeah.
What would you do with $1 million?
Travel.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to do the entire Bare Naked Ladies song, and I was like, that's fun.
It's been...
No. If I had $1 million, now you.
We should use that now because we had 2 episodes where I did a 1 week gag because we had 2 movies where 1 week plays a overwhelming role in both of those movies.
As it should.
Now I'll just start inserting some. If I had $1 million,
I really want to talk about the music in Office Space as well because I also remembered listening to one song, and obviously we can get later. The second it started playing, I just forgot, and then I remembered how much I would.
All I know is that if this episode does not include the bad touch, I will be sorely disappointed.
I can tell you my relationship did.
Oh, no.
He wasn't good in bed.
We'll get to all of that. It's funny, speaking of one of the things, Joey, that I said at the end of the intro was like the way this movie plays now. $1 million is like, I guess I'd pay a few bills.
That's 1/10 of what Alex Jones owes to the Sandy Hook.
1/1000th of what Alex Jones
my job.
You're right. I don't know math. Please.
$1 million is nothing. You keep your job and pay some bills. That's right. $1 million. It's not a lot of money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. what 23 years has wrought. Joey,
Huh?
when did you first see this movie?
So I don't know why this was the case, but I had my best friend growing up. Every time he came over to my house, we would have this movie on. Like while we were playing video games, we would drink soda, play video games, and watch Office Space. And literally most weekends, I watched this movie.
Wait,
So
as a
sometime in
kid?
high school,
As a kid? Oh, that's so
yeah,
weird.
like 15 or 16.
You're like my
Probably.
favorite Office movie is.
I don't know why. I don't know what, because I was saying in the intro, I never saw King of the Hill before this. I never really saw Beavis and Butthead. I did not know Mike Judge. I did not watch Friends. I did not know any of these people, and yet somehow I adored this movie.
That's really interesting.
That
I mean,
is interesting.
it is very clever and funny in the way that it's written.
I'd love to circle back on this Beavis and Butthead thing. I get that you're
Yes.
young, but I am just.
Well, I was raised very Christian, and I was not allowed to watch anything.
Oh,
and
I think they were Christian. They seemed quite like two God-fearing young men. I don't.
maybe.
Well, they're from
I'm having-
Texas, so who knows?
Yeah, I'm having trouble
Yeah.
following what you're saying.
But I will say that the information you don't know from our intro is that Office Space is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
A fact that seemed to befuddle John in a way that I was not prepared for.
I'm befuddled. We just met.
I think I've seen The Matrix more than any other movie. I think the number 2 movie I've seen the most is this movie. I think at one point in my life I had like all of this movie memorized. I'd seen this that much. I don't know why either. Like I love it. I can't really define it, but I love it.
I mean, I guess there's like O-face could be a joke that appeals
I
to
hate
like
that though. Like that's my least favorite part of this movie.
I agree. It's
Yes.
it's a low hanging fruit. It's an hanging fruit. I said that.
That's
Yeah.
it's that and the case of the Mondays that if someone says that's their favorite joke from this movie, you're like, you didn't really
No.
get the movie then, did you?
No, I wrote all my favorite quotes down.
I think it's a good indicator of what this movie did that none of us saw in theaters because nobody else did either.
Well, I don't know. The internet. I mean, I understand that other movies weren't failing for the same reason in 1999, but
Yeah.
I bet if I was more active on the internet, I maybe would have seen it. Or if
I don't
I'm
think
sure, was it being framed as from the creator of Beavis and Butthead comes something that's not Beavis and Butthead at all, but
we
you'll
we
still
talked about
enjoy
this.
it?
We talked about this in
Okay.
the intro as well, and it's like part of the problem was that even in '99, Beavis and Butthead had been off the air for a year and a half or 2 years or so, and it was still not appreciated as the satire that it was, even with the movie.
There's also
Mike-
magical realism in this movie, which is
Yeah.
absurd, very absurd. And that part I completely forgot about until we got
Yeah.
to it. And that's for me, that's my favorite scene, top to bottom. It has my favorite line. That's my favorite scene in this movie.
I guess like I'm a good case study here though because I loved Beavis and Butthead. I loved King of the Hill, but I was a huge Beavis and Butthead aficionado, and I understood it as satire. Like I loved it like intellectually, right? And I didn't see this movie in the theaters because it, like the way that it was marketed, the Mike Judge element of it, the satire element of it, did not hit at all. The trailer sucks. The marketing campaign was terrible, and it
Well,
came
John,
out.
work sucks as the
Yeah.
tagline.
Well, I don't pay attention to trailers anymore, and now marketing, and not to bring it back to my podcast, but
Yeah.
a movie that suffered greatly due to marketing, and there are so many, was Jennifer's Body.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Was
it's a great
famously
corollary. Yeah,
famously got screwed in the old marketing department. So
Yep.
I've learned to not pay attention to trailers. I don't read reviews. I don't do anything. If the idea of a movie appeals to me, I'm going to go. But the fact that people are swayed by things like reviews and trailers is so crazy to me. I find that to be baffling.
Whoever could have imagined that a female-led, female-written, female-directed horror movie could have been sullied at the box office? Whoever could have gathered that people did not want to see women succeed?
Not this female.
No.
It's interesting though, Joe, because like this movie and our last movie, Election, right, are
Ooh.
both duds that are fantastic, and nobody
Election
knew.
was a dud.
Oh, absolutely, and nobody.
Were
knew
they
what the
like
fuck
Matthew
to make of
Broderick
it.
killed a person, so we can't go see this motion picture in
No.
good conscience? Oh, okay.
No, Jen, no.
I
it's
know
not
he was
that.
very sad about that. I'm sorry.
It was. We don't know what the like because again, I think it's a very interesting sort of similar dichotomy where you have like Jennifer Aniston. You don't know how to sell her as this movie, and like you're not looking for the Jennifer Aniston audience with this movie. And the same thing with like Reese Witherspoon in Elections. Like this is not what you think a Reese Witherspoon movie is going to be right now. And I just think nobody knew how, like both of these movies were marketing disasters, right? And I think that's a really interesting sort of parallel between the two of them. Um, I loved Mike Judge, and I did not go to see this movie in theaters. I worked in a video store the summer that this movie came out, and I saw it when I worked in the video store,
Hmm.
and I mostly loved it. I like I the parts I really loved, and my criticisms of it are my criticisms of most comedies, right? So,
Yeah, so why
um,
don't you love this movie, John? What's your problem? Why don't you love Office Space without reservation?
okay, so I'll say this: the reason I don't love it without reservation is because I think it completely falls apart in the final act. Um, I think like it's a 2 hour comedy is almost impossible to make. A 90-minute comedy is very, very difficult. This is 89 minutes, as I said, and like there are elements of the last 20 minutes where I'm like, it's over. Like all the jokes are done, and like get to the point and finish it. And I just feel like it's putting like it is. I would watch the first 60 minutes over and over again forever. And then
Like, so
like
what point in the movie does it like pivot for you? Like, at what point you're like, this is over?
I'm not quite sure, but I think it's once the obsession over the idea that he thinks that his boss slept with Jennifer Aniston, when that becomes a major plot point, is like when it starts to sort of lose a lot of its bearings and sort of dwells on that too much. And everything up to that is perfect. That's my only real issue.
It does feel like they would have said Bill Lumberg? No, Ron Lumberg. Okay, got it.
Right.
Oh, I do think it's such an odd name that I personally would not have questioned. I'm
Right.
like, which Lumberg? I would have thought,
Right.
especially if the
Lumberg.
Lumberg
One
was my
Lumberg.
arch nemesis.
And
Then
also, if they've been like together for a few weeks or months or however long this movie takes place,
we
like he would
cannot
have mentioned,
tell.
even if he's not talking about work because he doesn't care about work, he would have mentioned his boss and how he hates his boss, Lumberg.
Right.
It would have come up.
Well,
Right.
it's also very. I mean, I'm trying. So we're not. I don't care about this. I know this is going to sound terrible. We're not going to look at this movie through 2022 eyes, or are we going to
No.
look at this movie through 2022 eyes? Because otherwise, I would be like, oh, the slut shaming is so annoying.
Yes.
After admitting to this woman that you're stealing, all that's very frustrating. But who cares right now? It's
I do think
2022.
in that defense, like she kind of owns it in a way that like, fuck you. Like you don't I don't owe you
She's
anything.
very charming in this
Yeah.
small role. I would have liked to have seen more Aniston
I agree. I
and
agree.
less of this bizarre. This I do. Also I will say this. I completely forgot about Y2K. This is built entirely upon the Y2K panic,
Uh-huh.
and I
Yep.
just forgot about all that as well, and was like, oh my god, remember that?
Yeah, it
So
really
this
mattered.
movie,
It was a big deal.
I would love to see anyone under the age of, I guess, 35 watch this movie today and have any idea what's going on. There's just too much. It's too much of a snapshot
Yeah.
in time for anyone, I think, to get like, what do they mean? What are they doing with why are they backing everything up for the year 2000? I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
So,
agree. I think I really like Jennifer Aniston in this movie. I full disclosure, like I don't like Jennifer Aniston broadly speaking. In general, like
I'd love to.
In general.
There it is. Well, do
in
you guys,
general.
in doing your research, did you, because I found her presence to be shocking. This is right in the middle of Friends,
Yes,
smack in the middle of
that's what
Friends.
I
I
talked
have,
about in the intro. Yes,
okay,
Yeah, we
guys,
talked
you guys, I got to get in on the intro then
I
because
know. I'm sorry.
well, this is in our defense, this is the most the intro has ever come up.
okay,
We rarely talk about the intro. Like it's all just like basically for the listener, and
Yeah.
then
sorry,
it's come up like 5 times. We're like to date, I think it's come up a total of 5 times
sorry.
ever. So you win or lose. I guess
I
you can
don't
say that
know.
it's a loss.
I'm the
No, but
everyman. I'm
make
the
your point.
everyman.
Make your point though,
Well,
Jen, because I think
I
this is
just,
really important.
I
Yeah.
need to know how she was cast and got on this motion picture,
Yes.
presumably at the height of her fame on Friends. It makes no sense to me. This is an independent movie, I believe. Okay.
I
So,
agree. I like again. I don't know the story there,
okay.
and it's weird. And you're right. It is in the literal like height of Friends popularity, and she had
Mm.
already done a couple of movies that weren't
She did
Great.
Picture Perfect with
Picture
Jay
Perfect.
Moore, a
Yep.
movie that something you don't know about me as internet friends, but not IRL friends, is that I have a very high tolerance for bad movies. In fact, I seem to be like, I crave them inside of me. Uh, Starting to do, so I married an axe murderer fortnightly. And I love that movie as well. And Jay
Yeah.
Moore is great in that movie.
Yeah.
And, you know, other than that, Leprechaun, because I looked to see, because I know she did that weird string of rom coms. She
What's
just
the
got,
other one with like Paul Rudd? What's the
oh, the one where he's gay and she's in love
The
with
object of my
Yeah,
him.
affection.
There
that's
it
the
is.
one.
They
Yeah.
were
That one's
like
pretty good too.
all bob, 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 bob.
Yeah.
Until finally she started doing like the serious roles.
But she didn't like, so we were talking about that. Like, she's never really figured where she belongs in movies.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking and like she did The Good Girl. She was in Bruce Almighty, which I totally forgot. But Along Came Polly. Like, it's like you look at like
That was
she
with
just
Ben Stiller. That was
Rumor Has It, The Breakup, Marley and Me, The
rumor
Switch.
has
Like,
it
these are
was
all
very weird.
terrible movies.
Not
Yeah.
good.
Oh, I don't know. The
Wanderlust is
breakup.
great.
The breakup was a little. Obviously, Wanderlust was great. Thoreau, I think, wrote that one. That's probably where they met, right?
Horrible Bosses is great. Like the her newer
10 out of
stuff is
10.
better, but like
She's
there's a
not. She's
stretch. I'm
never the
like,
marquee name. She's never the anchor.
Well, do you guys watch the morning show? Not to just make this
I
too
have
many
not
no,
watched
an
the morning
I've
episode
show.
of
I
heard
Too
love
no
Many
good
Jeff
things
Jeffers.
about.
Best. Yeah.
I've heard no good things about the morning
It's
show.
great. She's
I've
great.
heard really good things about the second season of the morning show. So
It's great. She's great. This is an episode of Too Many Jennifers. Just all Jennifer Aniston. Finally,
but
thank
again, I
God.
love Reese Witherspoon. So
Yep, can't go
speaking of
wrong.
speaking of
This is
Alexa.
1999, the morning show.
No, but to answer your question, John, I don't know how she wound up in this movie. Aside from the fact that she was really fishing for some role in movies that like where she fit from that Friends jump
Because
into movies.
nobody, and I literally forgot that Ron Livingston was in Swingers. I just
Yep,
also, because that was the only other slightly now major, not then major.
correct.
He had done
Yeah,
nothing at all. I mean, I was
yep,
trying to figure out, she was the biggest one, and I guess maybe Stephen Root, John,
yes,
who was
and
perfect.
McKinley.
Now, did I meant to do this and I didn't do this? Did you guys go and watch any of the Milton cartoons that this was based on? Because this
I did
started
a while ago, not for
Yeah, I
this,
have
but
a long.
like
I
a
did a
long
long
time
time
ago I saw
ago.
them.
Yes.
because I was not actively watching Saturday Night Live when this was happening.
Oh,
Apparently,
it was
that was a night.
SNL. That's what it was. It
It
wasn't
was
like the
yeah,
television. It
because
was
Mike
SNL.
Judge, and I
Yeah.
also meant to do this. He was recently on an episode of Fly on the Wall, which is the Dana Carvey,
Right.
David Spade podcast, and he talked
Right.
about Office Space. And I meant to go re-listen, but I forgot that he wrote on SNL, and I guess these were shorts in like the early '90s. So this
Right.
was
Right.
Wait,
seven.
Mike Judge wrote on SNL?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a writer.
Wow.
So this was 7 or 8 years after they were on SNL. So I don't
Right.
know what must have been development hell or
His
whatever.
short film about Milton called Office Space was in '92. So
Okay.
that tracks.
Okay.
Early '90s, right? And I couldn't remember if it was. I said to Joey in the intro, I couldn't remember if it was Liquid Television or SNL, but like
Eon
yeah,
Flux.
SNL. Okay, yeah, yeah. I remember like I don't think I saw them at the time. I went back and tried to find them shortly after I saw this movie because I like really liked this movie. I love Stephen Root.
Yes.
I was a big News Radio fan.
Yes.
I love the supporting cast of this movie, like all around. Gary Cole's fucking
Well,
amazing.
God, and also a couple of vampires are in this movie. Ron Livingston hasn't
Yes.
aged a goddamn day. Gary Cole, not a
Yeah.
single fucking day.
McGinley.
Aniston, McGinley looking even more hair now than he did
Yeah.
then. Somehow, we know how. It's crazy to look at it now and not. It makes even less sense now that it didn't do better.
It's I will say that in a period of time where you don't have the same kind of like ability to drive, because the Blair Witch Project, getting back to what we started talking about here, right, was the first movie that experimented with the idea of a promotional campaign that was internet based, which is now just ubiquitous. Like, of course, you're going to be plastering social media with advertisement. Office Space did not exist. Like, it was before Blair Witch by several months. It didn't exist within that sort of zeitgeist. So it couldn't take advantage of that. And as you say, like, Ron Livingston was one of the other guys in Swingers, right? Like, Jennifer Aniston was the girl from Friends who is not at all the target audience for this movie. And then you have a bunch of really well beloved niche great comedy actors like Stephen Root and John C. McGinley, and the guy from Mad TV whose name I now forget.
Oh, is that was that
Herman,
Michael
David Herman,
Michael
David
Bolton's
Herman.
David
David Herman,
Herman? Oh, I
and
forgot that he was
Who's
on
also
that
on King of the Hill.
yeah,
Oh,
and Gary Cole, and like that's not what you sell a movie on. And so I think part of the problem is that I think that Mike Judge had not established himself as a great satirist yet, because I don't think anybody quite got exactly how great Beavis and Butt-Head and King of the Hill were in
well, also
1999.
these are two different audiences.
Yeah, for
You're
sure.
not going to get, obviously Beavis and Butthead is for teens, and then this is for couldn't tell you, fans of TGI Fridays, I guess. I don't know.
I guess I could, but I think like maybe if there was
Fans of
more
Flair,
time
yeah.
between the two, it could be the same audience. Like the Beavis and Butthead
Nowadays.
audience grows up and gets jobs and hates it, right? Like that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But they're
Hell
basically
yeah.
simultaneous in a way, right? So
this was a long con. The marketing was actually wait 20 years.
It
Wait
really
for the
was.
Beavis and Butthead kids to grow up and then have these Power Man 5000 style worlds collide.
Wouldn't say I've been missing it, Bob.
Oh God, I know. I lost it. Can I talk about a couple of things I noticed that maybe you guys already
Do it.
knew?
Do it.
So at one point, when Peter meets with the Bobs.
Yeah.
Also so funny. It's just those little touches. You're like, why? Their names don't both have to be
The
Bob.
jump
But
to
my God,
conclusions, Matt.
it's that you could jump to. And he's talking about his day, and he says, "I space out for about an hour." And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, is the space an office space also a pun for how he spaces out? So you're at your space, your office space, but is it also like this is what I'm doing here? I'm spacing out, and maybe
I
I'm
like that a lot.
maybe I'm pulling
Interesting.
too much.
Great take. Great take.
So there was that. Also, when he's talking about with the hypnotherapist, which is occupational hypnotherapist, was it? Which is again my favorite scene. That guy's a character actor too. I didn't even
Yep.
write his name down.
They all are. Yeah, there's a ton. Yeah.
When he says, "Is there any way you can sort of zonk me out so I don't know I'm at work?" And I was like, "Oh shit, this is Severance was based on Office Space."
Yes.
So I'd love for somebody better get some checks, write Mike Judge some checks because he already created Severance in 1999.
I also feel like the American Office was a combination of Ricky Gervais's BBC Office and Office Space. Like I feel like the American Office doesn't exist without Office Space. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I do feel like that there's a certain kind of a template that Office Space created that The Office built from that made it different from the British one.
I wonder if I'm sure Ricky Gervais was aware of it. Look, I've really never seen the American Office all the way through, but I've seen the British version many times because I'm an insufferable dickhead.
I've only seen a handful of the seasons of the American Office, and I don't like it. I don't think it's funny.
There's only like 10 seasons, so hopefully that's...
Yeah, you could breeze through it in a heartbeat.
I think the issue that I've had is that I've always watched it with people who are like, why aren't you laughing? Why aren't you laughing? This is so funny. This is the best episode. Why aren't you laughing? I'm just
Laugh,
like,
Joey.
because the pressure's on this.
Please don't hang out with those people.
Oh my God, it's Diversity Day. Why aren't you laughing? This is the best episode. Well, maybe if you weren't staring at me, laughing in my face about how funny it is, maybe I would laugh.
That stresses me out.
Laugh.
It's not good.
I love them both. But I do think that there's something, like I do think a lot of the DNA of Office Space is in the American one that isn't in the British one, for sure.
I mean, listen, the Brits get it. 2-3 seasons were out. Why are we...
Oh God, don't, yes. Life on Mars.
What are we doing?
It's 2 perfect seasons and then we're done.
Just saying, get in, get out. What are we doing?
And a season is 8 episodes.
That's how they treated all their colonies. Get in, get out. Just kidding, they're all still there. That's not true. I also wrote a lot of things down. I mean, we can't just be like, what are all your favorite lines?
Go. Do it.
I just typed all my favorite quotes out.
I love it. I love that you have notes. Nobody comes prepared for a podcast, Jen. So this is a breath of fresh air for us. So.
Well, I think the one that we might have I remember quoting very often, ever since I started working, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before. So that means that every single day that you see me, that's on the worst day of my life. And then the therapist goes, how about today? And he's like, worst day of my life.
Yeah, that's heavy.
That's
the only corporation that I've ever worked for, Jen, was called Fox. So I think you get the sense that I'm
Fox?
Yeah, it's 20th Century Fox.
Oh, heard of it. Well, there's a
otherwise
lot
known
of
as
Foxes.
News Corp. So I've had corporate hell. Like
So have I.
I relate.
Well, we're
Yeah.
also old enough. Like I distinctly, I mean, I used to say PC load letter whenever any equipment in the office wasn't working. It didn't matter which piece. I would just be like, PC load letter. What the fuck does that mean? Like I just say it to myself. It was the phone wasn't working. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
I have been in offices where there is the Tom Smykowski where it's like, what would you say you do here? Because it's like there are people that you work with sometimes. It's like you don't need to be here. My it wasn't really subtweeting because it wasn't on Twitter, but when the job that I have now, I worked at for 3 or 4 years, and then when I moved to Texas, and I was like, I want to meet people, I want to go in an office. I got an office job, and I was there for a year, and then they fired their entire marketing department. But like at one point, my subtweet was just making my Facebook cover photo the picture of Peter Gibbons playing Tetris. I'm like, this is mentally where I'm at right now. Like it's the perfect mood of just like I'm here, I'm putting in the time, but I'm not here.
Oh, I also want to just hold about 10 minutes of space for, and I've never said his name out loud, Diedrich Bader,
Mm-hmm.
the next door neighbor. I mean, wow, what a thrilling. Has anyone with so little screen time ever captured my heart
I
as
love Diedrich
quickly
Bader
as he just,
so fucking much.
when Peter's
So
like,
much.
has anyone ever said, you have a case of the Mondays at your job? And he goes, I believe
Nah,
you get
man.
your ass kicked saying something like that, man.
Shit, nah, man.
If he had $1 million, I'd tell you what I'd do. 2 chicks at the same time.
But then the better part is that he's like, I don't think all women are into money. He's like the type of chicks double up on a dude like me, darling.
And
Like he knows exactly who he is.
he's not lying.
But I do think his funniest line though is the second, like when all's going to hell and they order 40 subscriptions to Vibe from Orlando Jones, who we did not mention yet.
Orlando Jones.
Right.
And
That's
he's like, what am I gonna do with 40 subscriptions to Vibe? And then he sits down and just goes, Hey Lawrence, you want to come over? He's like, no, man, I don't want you screwing up my life too. Like, just like it quietly trails off. Like, I don't want to be here. Just like the very subtle, like, I heard everything. You're on your own, man. Like, it's perfect. I love it.
Speaking of like this movie being a product of its time, though, I think what most people wouldn't be able to appreciate is that like Diedrich Bader was probably the second most famous person in this movie at that time.
From Drew Carey.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Yeah,
that's right, the
like,
Drew Carey show.
And in which he was brilliant, but like Jennifer Aniston and Diedrich Bader, I think were by far the two most recognizable names of the whole cast.
Did he also wind up in Veep with Gary Cole?
Yeah, he was
did,
on
right?
Veep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like again, a very similar satirical style between what's his name, Iannucci and
Armando Iannucci, yeah.
Yeah, and Mike Judge. I mean, they're very like one's a Scottish Italian, the other's an American.
Not to keep referencing other podcasts.
Who graduated from Harvard, but
yeah, because this is shot in Austin, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's never. I was again in the intro. Wink, wink.
God damn it! I swear to God,
we literally have never talked about the intro this much before.
It's never explicitly said that it's
no
Austin. It's very clearly Austin.
Yeah.
Like the highway in the beginning is 35. Like it's very clearly Austin in tone and in content, like in tech and everything. Like and that's just where Mike Judge does his thing. So.
I also,
you were saying another podcast.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm so sorry. It's like, what am I? I'm here to promote other podcasts. But actually today, Tony Hale was a guest on Smartless and he actually brought up Veep. And when you said that director's name, I was like, this is the second time. Or is it creator? The creator's name. I was like, second time I've heard that today. I also found something for you guys. It's 20 things you might not know about Office Space. I'm not going to read them all off to you psychotically, but they mention Aniston and they don't cover why. And it's just like, tell me. I don't understand.
Nobody knows.
So I was just trying to see if I could like find
it's a mystery.
Interesting things while we're talking.
Nobody knows.
I think she was cast in this movie so I could have an easy answer of like, what's your favorite thing she's ever done? It's like, well, it's this movie.
Yeah. I think so.
Because otherwise it's We're the Millers, I guess, which is like, no, it's probably not the Millers.
No. Or Friends. I like Friends.
It's probably Horrible Bosses.
That's true.
That's her best movie.
I mean, other than this, maybe. I don't know.
I'd have to look at her catalog again.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that Gary Cole was Mike Brady in the Brady Bunch movies too, which was God bless
Gary
him.
Cole fucking rules. And like Gary Cole, so there was one of the great lost series of the 90s is a series called American Gothic, which
Mm-hmm.
lasted for one season, of which Gary Cole was the star. And that show fucking rules, and he is so goddamn amazing at it. Like, Gary Cole is just, he is funny and serious and amazing, and everything he touches is just goddamn gold. And like, he is the most under, he is the Stephen Root of Gary
Mhm.
Cole's. Like,
Wait, hold
like,
on. That show is Gary Cole and Lucas Black from Tokyo
yes,
Drift?
yes.
Oh my god, and Sarah Paulson and Nick Searcy from
Sarah
Justified?
It's
Paulson.
one season, and you would really like it because it was part of that X-Files vibe, like
Okay.
of that era. It would have been a brilliant show if it kept on going, but man, it was good. Gary Cole, I fucking like I evangelize Gary Cole every chance I can get. And he like Stephen Root, because Stephen Root is also a fantastic dramatic actor, as Gary Cole is as well. Like Stephen Root, he is this like niche person who, like, if you know who he is, you love him and you will want to see everything that he's in. Like Stephen Root in like Man in the High Castle
Oh.
and this, it's like, how the fuck do you have that range? And like News Radio, and like, yeah, I love, and like McGinley, same thing. Like McGinley's also a really great dramatic actor. He's a
He's also
fantastic comedic
terrifying.
actor.
He's a great bad guy. He's got resting bad guy face.
100%. And like, that's, I think that like Mike Judge is really great at picking those guys out. Like
Mm-hmm.
having these, because like part of the whole thing with Gary Cole in this movie is that he's hysterically funny, but also like insufferably evil. Like he is the embodiment of corporate evil. That
Yeah.
you're just like, I want to fucking murder you so much, and like, I love this character, and it's goddamn hysterical. And that's a really difficult chord to strike effectively in
And
comedy.
again, he looks the same. He looks because he is currently on, I want to say either FBI or FBI Most Wanted, one of those
Yeah,
procedural shows. And I
yeah.
only know about this because I get to write about it for work. And I'm sure it's nice for him, but I need my Gary Cole to be a little funny. That's what I want out of my Gary Cole. So
And Livingston is married to Rose, what's her face, and they are both aging fucking
McGowan?
phenomenally.
no,
No, the other one.
Byrne?
no,
No,
that's Bobby
from Mad Men.
Cannavale.
Rose.
Cannavale.
No, Rose
Hold
Leslie.
on a sec.
I'm gonna keep naming roses until you
Rose
No,
Nyland, R.I.P.
Demi Rose?
no, no, no. Shut up.
Rose Jax Rose from Titanic.
No,
She's okay.
Rose from Rose and Bernard of Lost?
nope.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
It's
Nope.
Rosencrantz Guildenstern. You got it. That's the
That's what I
one. That's
thought.
the one I was
Yep.
thinking of.
And she's beautiful.
This
Is
better be a good
married.
big
I
payoff.
could have found this out 45 seconds ago, but I don't want to know.
Married to
Rosemary DeWitt.
Rosemary DeWitt.
All you got to
Right.
Google is Ron Livingston wife, and it just pops up there.
It took me a second. I had to go to my key. Yeah, she's amazing.
She was
I
also
love
married
her.
to Chris Messina.
But Rosemary DeWitt
Alright.
and Ron Livingston are both still incredibly hot, and
Great.
good for them. You
Ooh,
love
I'll tell
vampires,
you,
Jen. So
I do. I
you should
do.
really enjoy them.
I will tell you that a haunting line for me, I had to do a quick Google, and it was much faster than whatever Ask Jeeves nightmare you just put us through. No, I'm kidding.
John, I need you to leave that in and put the Jeopardy music behind it because that took forever.
It was very
Me and
No, the
Jen
rose thing,
named
the
like
rose
40
thing.
different
I
roses.
I rewatched the movie while you were looking. So
It wasn't 89 minutes, Jen.
John, that old man on the walker passed you
oh
by
my
while you were
God,
looking
there
for
it
that
is.
on
That
Google.
was so funny.
Yeah.
Also,
You
I
could have
wanted
just
to.
like known things. That's fine.
When that scene happened, then they cut to Michael Bolton in the car rapping, and I said to myself, "Is this the first time in cinematic history that we see a white man slowly roll up a window while he's rapping because a black man is walking by his car?" And I remember, see, that's the kind of stuff that you can connect to because
Yes.
that I know that happens. I know that happens. I know that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And that's not even a 1999 thing because I'm sure that still happens today. Also, I was very haunted by when the first time Peter came into work late after being hypnotized. And I think Michael Bolton's like, "What the fuck's going on, man? I thought you were going to come in here and start shooting." And then I said, "When was Columbine?" And it was 2 months after this.
It
Exactly.
was.
Exactly 2 months.
Well,
Almost
because
to
they
the
also
day.
make in Tchotchkes,
He does
the
he goes like
douchey waiter goes like, so
yeah.
yeah, so
And I was like, oh boy, that is the last time in 1999 I think we will see those sorts of jokes, maybe.
Columbine plays a pretty big role in some of the movies that we've covered. But we've talked about it a few times because some of the movies that came out around Columbine were obviously affected one way or the other by Columbine. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about this
The
as
way
being
that
like
glitter was affected
pre-Columbine.
by 9/11 or a different way?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
almost exactly the way the glitter was affected by 9/11.
Yes.
Yeah,
or
no,
glitter.
no, it's interesting. You're right that there's a lot of stuff that it's like, ooh, you
I
didn't
mean,
go.
I have to assume they were kind of doing a very old school, like going postal sort of reference, because at that
Yes,
point,
that's
that
exactly what was happening.
that's what they were thinking of. But
And
now,
that was a
obviously,
very
through
big sort of cultural meme was the idea of going
yeah,
postal at the time, and
but in
it was
2022 eyes, you're just like, ooh, children in a
ooh,
school,
doesn't age well. I
not
mean, pre
fun.
Columbine, pre 9/11, like that's a lot of like what makes so like a lot of the movies that we talk about are pre and post Columbine, and they're all pre 9/11, and like a lot of the way that we think about them sort of changes, right, because of both of those events. And yeah, this being before either
Yeah.
is yeah,
You get
pretty
a lot of
interesting.
loving shots of the Twin Towers that, and this is
Yeah.
not, I mean, it is really, it's very jarring to see. And it's very weird to think that some children, or I guess adults now, have no idea what that skyline looks like. And I think we should take this podcast down 6 or 7 notches or 9 to
Like the
11
first three
notches and
seasons of The
just,
Sopranos. Let's talk about not depressing things. Yeah, it's a really, really great
hey,
idea.
oh, we could bring it back up to the Ghetto Boys and their significant part in this movie. I
Fuck
believe
yeah,
that's the
let's do
band.
that.
And
I will
how
also say that I listened to the soundtrack hundreds of times and like never went deeper, like never looked at the Ghetto Boys music. I was just like, these like 2 or 3 songs on
this
here,
was the
that's enough for
first
me.
and only time they show up twice, and I don't recall, and this means nothing, hearing them before that, and I can't quite recall ever hearing them again. And I just feel like, were they friends with Mike Judge? Like, who were these wonderful?
I mean, probably.
Maybe
Like
everybody
knowing
was.
Mike
Maybe
Judge,
Aniston.
like,
Maybe
yeah, probably.
Aniston is just friends with her. I mean, maybe this just very much feels like I asked my friends to be in my movie.
Where's Aniston from? Is she from Texas?
I don't
That might
know.
be it. She might know Mike Judge. Like it's like that sort of thing makes sense to me.
Yeah,
She
it
was born
does.
in Los Angeles.
Okay.
No. Oh, that's right, because her father was an actor. That makes
That's
sense.
right. Yeah.
Mm. So much
Her
for
family
that.
moved to New York City when she was a child.
So no.
Okay, can you wait a second and take 89 minutes to look this up, though, while John and I try to guess?
No, because you see, I'm a child of the internet age and I was able to learn how to
Oh,
Google
come on.
things, whereas John
Hey.
was like, let me go to
I just have a hard
alt.jennifer.aniston.talk.
time typing
I
sometimes.
didn't come
That's
to this
all.
podcast for the ageism. I came here
I
for the
went to the
rageism.
GeoCities Jennifer Aniston fan site,
Visitor
full of
counter
glitter
3.
gifts, and
I also, I don't know, I don't have anything to say about federal pound me in the ass prison,
yeah,
but because I
Wait,
was thinking
is that the
federal.
magical realism scene you were talking about?
No, the magical realism is when he gets hypnotized and his entire is basically put under a spell, which is not really a thing that would like this whole movie is hinges entirely upon Peter being put under a spell by a man who has a heart attack. God bless.
Because I thought we
But
were mentioning that before. I guess it was more like the dream sequence when they're talking when he's picture. It's literally a dream sequence where he's
Lumberg.
picturing their sentencing.
yeah,
He goes,
Oh,
"And you're
that
a very
too.
bad person, Peter Gibbons."
yeah.
But they're talking about when does it come up first? I can't remember, but I remember thinking, I think you could say that's homophobic, but I don't know. Anyone can get pounded in the ass, anyone at all. So I get that in prison it is a trope, and it's I know what they're trying to say, but also anyone can be in prison.
True,
So
true.
I found that could have been they could have gone in a different direction. They could have gone with that very predictable soap dropping, and they didn't. They just said federal pound me in the ass prison. It
That's a good
just
point.
I think it's okay to still laugh at that. I
It's quite
did.
progressive for '99. It's
I'm just
I
letting
also
you
don't
know.
know if this was the movie that popularized it or not, but I attribute it to this movie. But the kick someone's ass or become someone's bitch, like I feel like that's pretty solid.
Is that in this?
Yeah, that's what the lawyer tells. He's like, "Here's what I got a guy on the inside. Here's what he tells.
Mm.
Here's what he tells me on the first day: kick someone's ass or become someone's bitch."
That's right.
Again, maybe not PC, but I feel like it's solid advice.
let me ask you guys a couple questions. One is the question that Joey we sort of left off in the intro, which is
The intro again.
Intro talk.
God damn.
let's say we all saw this movie at a certain time where it made sense and where there was something culturally we could relate to. Is this movie still funny
Yes.
today to an audience that might not understand it, like sort of culturally? Is it like, are the jokes, I don't know, because I tried to separate myself when I watch it again. Like, I try to separate myself from the time and from my experiences, and like how much this resonates with my own experience of corporate
I
culture.
mean,
Is it
people don't
still funny to
even.
anybody? Like, is it like Some Like It Hot, where you're like, this is just a funny fucking movie regardless of when you're born
I
or,
think
or whatever?
especially now with the number of think pieces I've seen about like quiet quitting and everything, where it's just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
there's a resurgence in like I think this movie became newly re-relevant with the
yeah.
pandemic
I
because I
think
think
so
people
too.
were just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like
Yeah,
there's a line in here that feels like it could have been written this year, just like we were not meant to live in cubicles and stare at computer screens. It's like
yeah.
people realized in the last 2.5 years,
We're
this
meant to
is
be at
not what
home and
life is
stare at
about.
computer screens instead.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you said quiet quitting because I actually wrote that down next to Aniston because she's
Nice.
getting shit on for
Yep.
only having the bare minimum of the flair.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's the bare, that's, you said 15, so she's wearing 15. And now you're yelling at her because dipshit has 32. And I said, she's quiet quitting. You can't have a minimum and then get mad at somebody when they have the minimum.
What's also kind of, what I think is interesting about her is that she's coming from a place of like not condescension, but she's like, I don't think this crime you're about to commit is a good idea. But when she quits her job, she literally just goes next door and gets the same job, right? Like it's not like she has ambitions. She's stuck in this kind of like, this is just what I am, this is who I am. But I don't think that this like your plan to better yourself by being a criminal is like worth like there's a very I think there's another college thesis to be written there, I think, about her ethics, possibly. John, is that morals or ethics? What do we learn from my election? Is that morals or ethics?
That's her. I think that's ethics.
That's
Okay.
I'm gonna
ethics.
say
Because I feel like
ethics.
she's interesting in that like she she's had enough at the one place and she goes next door, which is probably better, but it's probably worse in other ways,
Well, she
right?
likes the
And
Yeah,
uniform better.
yeah.
So at least she gets that. I will say that one thing I liked about this movie is when Peter and we're just going to keep calling her Jennifer Aniston. I think it's Joanne. Sit down the first time when he walks in and asks her to have lunch, and then she sits down, and he keeps explaining how he's just not going to do anything. And I'm so glad she asked the questions that we're all asking, like, well, how are you going to pay your bills? How are
Yeah,
you going to do this? How are you going to do
yeah.
that? And
I like that.
he sticks to it. Because I think some movies would leave you hanging there. And I just remember thinking, yes, yes, how are you going to pay
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just I'm just not going to do that. I never like doing that either, and I just don't think I'm going to do that
bill?
either.
I like the ethics of this movie. Speaking of ethics versus morals, Joey, I like that it asked that question of like, would you really do nothing? I think about this movie a lot when I think about like my I win the Powerball scenario.
Oh, when?
I hate my job sometimes, and I get like, I emotionally hate my job sometimes, but I also would probably still do my job even if I didn't have to. And I think one of the things this movie sort of, in that very sort of Y2K pre-millennium anxiety like space, is really sort of contemplating, is that idea of like, it's not about hating working, it's about hating having to work
Mm,
because you don't have the freedom to do things you really want to do, which sometimes might be working. So,
hmm.
like, you might do work because you actually want to do it and because it's fulfilling, but it's the relationship between the work and the like necessity for having what it takes to survive that is the problem,
Well,
right?
it's like The Man. Like it's a problem with The
Yeah,
Man, right? Like
yeah,
it's like Silicon Valley, another Mike Judge property, where it's like you don't want to be acquired, you want to be your own boss. It's like King of the Hill, like people, Hank loves being like he doesn't want to, he's content where he is at the as associate manager, assistant manager at the propane sales place. Like there's just things where it's like you find your station in life, and you don't want to be told what to do, but you want to keep doing it.
I
No.
love teaching. I would love it more if it weren't my livelihood. And I think that's the really
Well,
profound
that's
insight of
kind
this
of what
movie.
that's what he says. I mean, that was honestly the conversation with the Bobs, the things that we hear during that part of the conversation about the motivation, what his
Yeah.
motivation is at work. And I was like, well, that's very true still to this day. Your motivation is not to get fired, which is you're earning money for a company and you're never seeing that money. It's like all of the things that he says, I was just like, oh shit. But
Yeah.
something that did strike me is, and I will ask you two this question: do you think it is admirable that he is someone who can do nothing, or is it fills me with anxiety? And I'm not,
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons, and I'm sure a lot of it's related to capitalism in some way, but I don't think I could. That's not an aspiration.
No.
So
I think this is so over on the Fast and Furious podcast that I do, Too Fast, Too Forever.
okay,
We have like
hold on.
this
I
sort of
do love
personality.
Fast and the Furious. I should have worn my
Ooh,
Paul Walker earrings. I'm
You
obsessed.
gotta
ooh,
listen
I
to
will
his
be in
podcast. You'll
touch
love it. Yeah.
down the road.
I love it.
But we have like a personality quiz, and we also have like either or questions. We ask, "Are you a Mia or a Letty?" And people
Okay.
are always like, "Oh, well, I'm not sure. I'm probably." We're like, "Well, if you're not sure, you're a Mia. Like you
Yeah,
can't not know."
you
And it's
know
the same
when
kind
you're
of
a
thing.
Letty.
It's like you can't have a podcast and be a Letty. I feel like you can't have a podcast, whether it's 1999 or Too Many Jennifers, and be okay with a day where you do nothing. It's like having a podcast that, keeps going, even if it's not successful, but keeps going, releases episodes. You have to be at least a little bit type A, and like you can't just be like, I would love to sleep till 3:30. I would also feel guilty the entire weekend. Like, what did I do? Where did Saturday go? Right? So
Oh, when he goes back to sleep for God knows how long, I got very anxious. I'm
Yeah.
also someone who, no matter how late I go to bed, I seem to spring awake at like 7 or even maybe 8 at the latest. But when I watched him just go back to bed, I was like, "Ooh, no, 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 no!" I felt dirty. I
Yeah.
felt gross.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't even have a family. I'm not in a relationship. I got no reason to be anywhere. But I was like, get the fuck out of that bed. Also, the decor was giving me anxiety in that way
Yeah.
that, like, first apartment decor, everything's beige, Venetian blinds, no character. Oh, I was feeling just sick all over looking at it. Hated it. Well,
It's weird because like the funny thing again, going back to sort of the time that I'm watching this movie is that Ron Livingston to me was in Swingers he plays the guy who like has his shit together and the rest of them don't. And he kind of plays that role of like get your fucking shit together, right?
mhm,
And here it's sort of the opposite, but he's really good at both of those. Like he's really good at that character who sort of comments on what everybody else is doing wrong,
mhm,
right? And that you kind of relate to is like, what a fucking bunch of train wrecks you're surrounded by. And I think that Mike Judge was very clever to cast him in that role because I do think that that's a very difficult role to play and to carry the movie effectively, and that he was not any kind of a star probably hurt this movie overall.
mhm,
But to sort of answer your question, I think that because of what I get from the character through Ron Livingston and through the writing is that he's lying about that. Like I don't believe that people want to do nothing. I just don't believe that. And I
well, it's
think
like
the
he
movie
just
like
wants it because he can't. He's not doing it.
right,
I
and I
think I
think the
think
movie
I think some
refutes
people
that
want to do
idea.
nothing. I think that there are some people who want to do
I don't
nothing.
really believe there are. I think there are very few outliers who genuinely would like smoke pot and play Xbox all day. I don't think there's that many
I
of
don't
them.
even know if he wanted to do it. I think he literally said nothing.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
did
Literally
nothing,
said
and it was
nothing.
everything I hoped it could be.
Yeah. And I think that is a reflection of like the freedom to do what you want, but not to do nothing, right? Like there's more to it than that, and I think the movie made me realize that people like want to do things that are meaningful to them without that having to be what forces like without it like they're being tied to I need to make money to live to make that
Mhm.
happen. And it's a very sort of like weird progressive socialist movie in that sense, right? That's sort of like the ideal that's presenting both the idea that like you don't have to force people to work through basically like denying them of the right to live if they don't do it, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Because people are going to be productive and do work regardless, and there's got to be some like middle ground here that lets that happen. And I think it also has a kind of like idealism about what the 21st century would be that never panned out, right? I think there's something about this movie that is sort of like, oh, it's looking forward to a future where we don't actually have to work because robots do
Mhm.
everything, and we can like
I
do
would I
things
would
we want.
oh, no, I would claw my face off. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, but like not it didn't happen.
No.
Well, the
So
most recent episode of Rick and Morty is where dinosaurs come and they fix all the problems on Earth, and people are just like, we're bored now. Like, we don't want
yes.
that.
Yeah.
I think we are made to do things. This is not like
Agreed.
capitalism is partially responsible for this, but I do think so how whatever put us here, science, nothing, God, whatever.
Yeah.
We are. Look, I don't want to be too depressing, but that's why when after people retire, when people once they don't have something,
Yeah.
that decline can be quite quick. I will get out of that and say, ask one question that I want. I should have paused it and stared at it, but did they set the actual office building on fire? Because that looked real to me. It was 19. I was like, this is a burning office building I'm looking at. I'm
Well, the
not.
White
It might have
House
been like a
on
facade.
fire in Independence Day also looked
No,
convincing,
but
and that
this
was
I don't.
96.
They didn't have that money. This was.
No,
I
I
just looked. It
know.
was $10 million.
But
This
John, that was
budget.
real. They actually burned the White House down in
Is that
Independence Day.
Oh
really?
God, I would know
Yeah.
this.
I thought
I
that
live.
happened in like the 19th century with the
I'm
British.
right
It
outside of
happened again. They
DC.
did it again because
They
Wilson
okay.
said, "Welcome to Earth," and then they burnt it down.
Yeah, it
Okay.
burnt down
Oh,
sometime
they
during
cleaned up New
Lincoln's
York City
time.
really well after that, and after Avengers.
Wait,
by
do you
the way.
think
Like,
Washington D.C. is New York City?
no, I'm just saying, but like New York City was also the same fate. Are you saying so? So you're saying the White House was fake, was real, but
Yeah, New York
the
didn't
Empire
happen.
State Building
That
was
didn't
fake?
happen. Yeah, correct.
Okay. I see. All right.
They can't redo that.
Wow. Special effects
Um,
in the 90s, man. Very complicated stuff.
I mean, it was basically, are you Jurassic Park or are you not Jurassic Park?
Dinosaurs are real, right? They brought them back to life for Jurassic Park.
I think we all
fill
felt
me in.
that.
Fill me in. What's
Also, in terms of Ron Livingston, I was looking at that
yes.
thing again, and
Art.
whoever casting wanted, they were looking at Matt Damon. They were
Yeah.
looking at
What
Ben
the fuck?
Affleck, and they were
No.
looking at Noah Wiley, who I'm
That's
assuming
better.
was riding that ER wave
He was.
at the time. A show I've started to rewatch on Hulu. Still got it. And also, Diedrich Bader was going to base his character. This is interesting. He was going to base him on Owen Wilson's Dignan. Is it Dignan from Bottle Rocket?
Mm-hmm.
That's who. And then he found out that Owen Wilson was also going to audition, and he had to change the character completely. So that's how we got that delightful little Southern misogynist, sexist, although not really.
Interesting.
Yeah, these fun facts off this website. Thank God for the internet.
That's
that I didn't
basically,
have.
Joey, the same list of people who were considered for Rick and the Mummy. So
Oh,
what do you
love
know?
Well, I
that
think that's
movie.
just like when we did Cruise Club and like every Tom Cruise movie. It's like it was also offered to Charlie Sheen and Nicolas Cage. It's like, yeah, because there were three actors that people hired in the 80s. Like that just in like in
Yes.
1999 there were three
It
actors.
was the cast of The
Yeah.
Outsiders was up for
Yeah.
every role.
Yep.
Eventually.
When we finally talk about Ripley, we got to talk about all the movies that Matt Damon wasn't in that year when he made that movie.
The Talented Mr. Ripley, because for 1 second I thought we were doing Sigourney Weaver.
No.
Oh.
The
Yeah,
Talented Mr.
I
Ripley.
got confused too. I'm like, Alien was not this year,
I was
John.
like, I don't think so.
No, that was several years earlier. All right, so let's have some fun. Like, this has been really interesting, and I think we have sold this movie. Like, I don't know, Joey, you love this movie. I love this movie, except for the last 20 minutes or so. I think it runs out of steam. Jen,
I love this movie.
yeah,
I love it. I think that
all the way
people can
through.
watch it today. And
Yeah, I
have
agree. I still
a
think
good
it's great.
time.
Yeah.
So here's the big question, Jen. Is this your favorite movie of 1999, or do you have another movie that you like more than this?
Well, hold on a second. Hold that thought.
Every movie.
Hold that thought. Jen can look up the list of 99 movies. Before we get there, I want to ask one more thing, which is, I think I have a favorite scene in this movie, the one that like I think of as soon as I see this movie in my mind.
Oh.
And I want to know what you guys
Is it the printer scene?
think. So that's one of them because it's so good.
It's like a it's
just
like a scene out of a Scorsese movie.
it's just
It's
so
really
fucking funny. It just works on every goddamn level. Like the printer scene is obviously brilliant. So let's take the printer scene out of it because I think that is sort of everybody's go-to favorite scene. Aside from that scene, is
I
there
already said
something
mine.
is
Mine
there
was
something
the
that sticks out?
hypnotherapist. The
Okay, the
hypnotherapist scene
hypnotherapist
is the
scene.
best because that's when you get the best line and the most haunting line, the one about every day being the worst day of your life. And I was like, God,
Yes.
he's
Yes.
fucking right.
Yeah. All right. There's your answer. Joey, do you have a favorite?
I genuinely love like almost every scene in this movie. I
I
do think my
know.
favorite one might be when Peter walks into the meeting with the Bobs in his sandals and just pours himself water and just has a conversation because he's like, it's not like he has a man with nothing to lose because like he doesn't even think he has nothing to lose.
I agree. Yeah.
And they're like, and they're just, we see upper management written all over him. It's like, from what? But I just think that that's so effortlessly, like everyone's so worried, and the way he leaves, just like, I hope your firings go really well.
It was delightful watching Lumbergh eat shit when they had to explain to him that he was actually one of the best employees there.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
like he's just like, I got a meeting with the Bobs. He's like, well, I didn't know about that. Oh, they called me at
They
home.
call
He's
me
like,
at home. It's such a throwaway line.
So I agree, Joey. Like that's one of my favorites. I love the I wouldn't say I'm missing it, Bob. I still say that all the time. That's like my go-to line. So then I will say then, since you both have covered two of the scenes that I love, I will say that like I think my favorite kind of like the gag in the movie that I think is just so inspired is the whole Michael Bolton thing.
sure.
Why should I change it? What is it? Why
Right,
don't
and I
you thought about
love
changing your
Bloody
I
name?
just
sucks.
love because
Mm-hmm.
it's like the way he plays out the whole idea of like him being like, I don't like his music, and they're like, what's your favorite song of his? Like, yeah, like, oh, do you know him? It's that whole like, oh, you lived in France, do you know so and so? Like, it's that whole thing. It's such a perfect gag, and it's a perfect gag for like the late '90s because Michael Bolton was like just coming off being really famous.
Mm-hmm.
He was like now adult contemporary kind of lame by the end of the 90s, and it's like the exact right time for that joke to hit. But I still think that joke really works because people still do shit like that. Like, if you have a famous name
Uh-huh.
to this day, and I think it's a great gag, and like the way that David Herman plays it is
Yes.
fucking fantastic.
I will also say another scene that I love with David Herman sells it in is the slow motion action scene where they're copying the virus to the floppy disk and then they
Yes.
pass it from
Yeah,
Michael Bolton to
just
Samir to Peter, and then
yeah.
he copies it to his computer, then walks
Yeah.
back over. They're like, oh yeah, I guess that was pretty easy, right? Like no one knows what they're doing. They're just copying files on a floppy disk. Like they're drawing more attention. Like it's so perfect. Like you think about the scene in the Matrix where like Neo's on the phone, the agents are pursuing him, and like there's like actual tension there. And like this, like they're trying to make it like that, but like nobody gives a shit.
No,
They're
nobody.
just dorks. They're just dorks with the floppy disk, right? Like, and who
Yeah.
cares?
I
Yeah.
also appreciate Mike Judge understanding that specific white man obsessed with rap music because
Yes.
Yeah.
when you get those brief glimpses of Michael Bolton's cubicle, you see a Snoop Dogg poster, and you're just like, I knew that guy. I know that guy.
And the way he goes to Peter, he goes, "What's up, G?"
Yeah.
Or after they do the scene. So like what I also love about the printer scene is that it's set to back up in your ass with, I don't know what the name of the song is, but like as like there it's scored to that in slow motion, like but they must be listening to that because then Samir drunkenly stumbles out of the apartment singing the lyrics to that song. It's like, but you weren't hearing the song. We heard the song, but like
Oh
they're still listening. Like
yeah.
it's a
Oh,
whole, I love it.
that is good.
And there's a direct tie there to the Beavis and Butthead element, right? Where like the sort of thing that Beavis and Butthead was satirizing is present
The
there.
BBCU, the Beavis and Butt-Head Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. And like I think there's a direct line somewhere between like Beavis and Butthead and Jesse Pinkman as
Mm.
like within like a decade of each other, but like that's like what Jesse Pinkman satirizes is also like the same. It's like that's how Beavis and Butthead would have talked if Beavis and Butthead began in like 2005 or 6, right? Like that whole thing. And I do think there's an element of like what Mike Judge, because Mike Judge also like loves that music himself as like a white guy, right? Like he
Yeah.
loves like Rob
Mike
Zombie and
Judge,
like gangster rap.
I just want to say on the record, I find Mike Judge to be very handsome.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's hot and
And
he's rad
yeah,
and like
yeah,
sexy
just
man.
putting that out
Graduated
there.
from Harvard, unlike
He's sexy. He's cute. He's
So
popular.
Tom Morello and Mike Judge, Harvard graduates. Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Harvard dropouts. So, take that as you will. That's.
Oh, did you want my favorite 1999 movie?
We're going to do that. So we end every episode with these two questions, which starts with what Joey had asked you earlier, which is your favorite.
Because I zipped through the list really quick, but the one that stood out for me the most, and the one that I've also frequently quoted and revisited, is Jawbreaker.
Okay.
Oh, you're also going to be on that episode. We've already talked about this. Yes,
we did. So that'll be great. It's very much a spiritual sequel to Heathers.
Yeah.
So I love that movie. That's the last time Rose McGowan was. She was not okay, and then she was not okay again in a different way.
I love her in Planet Terror.
Yeah,
I love Planet Terror. Yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah, no,
I love the late '90s Rose McGowan. It's going to be hard to talk about her because that's complicated. And
it is complicated, but that's okay because we'll talk about Rebecca Gayheart, the Noxzema girl.
The Noxzema girl. I had
when you were talking about who killed somebody. Who we mentioned
Rebecca
earlier
Gayheart.
killed somebody?
Rebecca Gayheart.
Well, no, I know Rebecca. That's why I bring it up now. But somebody earlier in the episode, we talked about killing somebody.
Oh, Matthew Broderick.
Sorry. That was a silly, because I know he deeply regrets it, and that was kind of a low
blow. No. But I was thinking when you said that, Rebecca Gayheart, because one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Dead Like Me, which is about Grim Reapers. Then she was on that, and then she left after 4 episodes, I think, because she's like, I can't be on a show where everybody's dying all the time because I accidentally killed a kid while I was drunk driving.
She did as well?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
Well, maybe that's a podcast.
Oh, that's a big thing. That's a big thing. I will say that the Noxzema commercial, if you're my age
and I am
me,
oh, okay, I'm not you.
That commercial was like, that is what the ideal woman is.
Well, that Jennifer Aniston is the Visine woman.
She has dry eyes. She also was a Vino, I believe, as well.
But even her friends don't know that she has dry eyes. It's a secret. She's
told
us.
I can't tell you how important Rebecca Gayheart Noxzema commercial was
I
for
can tell
my
you,
understanding of
I can tell you. I know. No, her hair, her everything.
Object.
And she's married to somebody.
I want to say
Eric Dane or whatever his name was.
Is that who it is? I think that's right. That sounds right.
I see a Euphoria box in the background, so you must know that a little bit. That's her husband, unless something's happened.
I should have known your answer because actually it was Jawbreaker that, like, the first movie that you mentioned. When I told you I was doing this podcast was like Jawbreaker. I was like, it was the same thing with Kelly with 10 Things. It was like Jen was like right on Jawbreaker.
But it's like Jawbreaker, and we're not going to talk about it now, obviously. But it is a movie that I believe, I'll just say one thing, it has somehow fallen through some sort of crack. It has missed.
Yes.
There are people who like certain movies should have liked Jawbreaker, and I do not know what happened. But it is just as dark and delightful as anything.
Of that ilk that we've had. So another one that some of our guests and listeners have talked about of that ilk is Drop Dead Gorgeous.
I love that movie.
Yeah. So like those two movies like completely passed over the year, but like have had a really slow but like big cult following since.
I do want to see. Look, I bet it's a post-Columbine movie. I'm telling you were right about that.
I have 2 updates. So number 1, Eric Dane and Rebecca Gayheart divorced in 2018.
Oh, sad.
They were married for 14 years.
Okay, then they must still be on each other's Instagram because I follow one of them like a psycho. Oh my God, get this. As luck would have it, Jawbreaker, February 19th. Same as Office.
Get the fuck out of here.
Nope.
I will tell you that it did not open in the top 10 because I told Joe what the top 10 movies were for that.
The other update I have is that if you search Rebecca Gayheart on YouTube, the first autocomplete is Noxzema commercial. And I also think based on this commercial, which I just watched, you are probably also of the mind that you love 90s Kerry Russell like me, and you also probably love early 90s Madgen Amick like me because they all have the beautiful face and the wonderful frizzy hair.
Which was devastating when she cut. I mean, it was a real...
I haven't seen Felicity. I know that's the only thing I know about Felicity. It's the haircut.
One of my friends, Kerry Russell, asked him out on a date one time,
and he said no.
the long story. They
Oh,
did not.
man.
He's married now and very happily so. But no, he worked at the Apple store. He was a genius, the Apple genius. He was a genius. Worked as a
okay.
genius. And Carrie Russell had a problem with her computer, and he went over to fix it at her house and asked her out, asked
Okay.
him out. And
What porn is this? The beginning?
I know, it sounds very porny. And
Wow, your
I'm
friend
not
must
quite
be
sure exactly
pretty.
what happened. He had never panned out. But
I'd like you to DM me a picture of your friend after this so I can just see what we're working with.
Do I know this friend, John?
No, you don't. I don't think you do.
I know your friend who was on Alex Jones's podcast.
No.
Oh, God.
Do you know about this, Jen? It's bad.
No.
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
proud
Not a
to
friend
age.
anymore, Jen. Someone who turned to the dark side
Yeah,
and has since been on InfoWars.
All right,
Bad
Jen.
stuff.
So your favorite movie of 1999 you said is Jawbreaker, right?
Yes.
What is your favorite movie of all time?
Back to the Future.
Well, look at that. Like right out of the back pocket.
Here is, you can't see, but to my left is my dog Lorraine.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were like pulling up your sleeve for a tattoo.
Well, I also tattooed Lorraine, but I also have a Back to the Future tattoo. I have all sorts of memorabilia. In February of 2020, before the world fell apart, I flew to England to see the soft opening of Back to the Future, the musical. I did see it twice. I did cry both times. A British woman next to me said, "Do you know that this is a comedy? Are you all right? It's a comedy. You're supposed to be laughing." And I was like, that'll come later. That's my favorite movie.
Do you like the sequels or no?
I enjoy the sequels. The third one grew on me. A lot of people shit on it, and I think it's largely because Doc Brown in a relationship is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. I understand that. But fun fact, is it going to be fun? Let's see. My family invented a gun. My mother's last name is Derringer, so the Derringer pistol. And that was the gun that John Wilkes Booth used to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. We're gonna get to that.
It's a fun fact. It's fun so far. Keep going.
And in the third film, there's that scene where they're at the dance and Buford Mad Dog Tannen says, "This is a Derringer, Smithy," and he has the gun in his back. And for years, I didn't clock what he was saying, and that's also a pun. And then one day I was like, "Oh my God, that's my family. My family." Tangentially is in my favorite franchise.
Speaking of your name, are you related to Ashley Tisdale?
No. I am not, but she does have a sister named Jennifer Tisdale, which is, and I'm sure that what I put out to the universe is wreaking havoc on her Google searches or whatever. Oh, I will say one more not interesting. This is maybe a fun fact. I once looked up my name on WikiFeet. I had my reasons, and Ashley Tisdale's real sister, Jennifer Tisdale, came up. However, the number one, I've never been on this site before, but I guess you rate pictures on WikiFeet. I'm not.
Her name, but your feet?
Well, hold on. The number one photo was of my foot, but it was an Instagram photo I took of my foot when I was in Europe, many years ago, and I hurt myself. So there's a huge bandage on it. And all I could think of was, these fucking losers are giving the most votes to an injured foot. That's how fucking gross they are. They're like, we like the one that's gross and fucked up more than all the other feet.
Injuries are sexy.
We want the sad hurt girl and her
your
bandaged
foot's been to
up.
War.
But meanwhile, my little injured foot is giving the other Jennifer Tisdale. She's getting all those likes from my foot.
I don't think they're likes that you want, though.
I don't know. You don't understand how low my self-esteem could go. But
there are so many goddamn John Brookses in the world that like none of this matters to me. Like it doesn't like. But like not they would you can Google me. Like the good thing is that you can Google me and like no one's ever gonna find me, which is awesome in some ways. But
sounds like a challenge, internet. Get to it.
It's the name of the of a player for the U.S. men's national team from a couple of years ago in soccer, but that's about it.
Yeah, there are other people with my name, but I somehow cornered the entire SEO. Like I'm more online than anybody else with my name, so it just I'm everything on Google basically. So
that's the dream.
Boring.
I guess so.
I love, Jen, by the way, that you. So like the Jawbreaker thing, I should have remembered because like of course that was the first thing that ever came up about this. But I love that you have just like it's Back to the Future. We've had a few guests who have that like ready to go in their pocket.
The most whine that it's too hard of a question.
Yeah, most of them is like, I've got 5. And we're like, that's fine, you can have 5. And
everyone, I mean, it's that or A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's part 6, Freddy's dead. But
oh, okay.
Don't worry about it. A lot of people
That's
are
a good one.
very shocked by that reveal. And I recently
Love it.
I realized recently, other than how much I love it so much because it's so wacky and insane. But it's also a movie about absentee dads and generational trauma, two things that I'm well versed in. And I saw that movie. That was the first Nightmare movie I was able to see in theaters. And I think that that's why I love it, obviously. But also, I was like, someone doesn't have a dad. And that's what this movie's about. So,
Actually, I want to take it back. I don't think that's a good one. I forgot that I don't like that movie.
you know
But I
what?
apologize. I just want to make sure,
New Nightmare's
at risk
great.
of offending you, I want to
First
make sure
one's
that on
great.
the record, I do not have me saying that I enjoy The Final Nightmare.
Could not be any less offended. I don't get why people get upset. I think what they hear is, "Oh, you don't like me then," and that's simply not true.
Yeah. Which is, you should
No.
like all the movies I like, but like whatever, that's fine. All right, lastly, before we go, like Joey, I want to give you a couple minutes here because this podcast, you always play like a certain role in the podcast, but you love The Matrix.
And I'm bucking the trend today.
And you love this movie, and it's one of your favorite movies of all time. And I just wanted you to give a little monologue before we finish of like explain, and if we've talked a lot about this movie over the course of the last hour, but like explain why you just love this movie.
I honestly don't know. Like growing up, one of my other really good friends read and loved Dilbert, and when I like slept over his house one time, like we were like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And this is before we knew Scott Adams was Scott Adams.
I know, R.I.P. emotionally.
R.I.P.
And he's
late
sitting
90s.
in his bed, like cackling at these comics, and I'm like, "Can I read one of these books?" He like gave me like one that he already read, and I'm just like, "I don't understand any of this." And I'm like, I don't know. Like he's very smart. Like I was smart. He was very smart.
Bill Watterson was like alt-right. Never mind. Go ahead.
Do not sully Calvin and Hobbes. Please do not.
Who created what's the Far Side again? What is his name? Is that guy okay?
Oh, Gary Trudeau. That's
Gary Larson.
Gary Larson.
Gary Larson. Yeah.
Just want to make sure all of our
Trudeau was Doonesbury.
Okay, go ahead.
Right.
And Jim Davis was Garfield.
Correct.
And he was reading Dilbert and like just cackling. I'm like, I don't understand. I don't think this is funny. Like, do you understand what's going on? He's like, I love it. I'm like, okay. And then fast forward like 6 years later, I'm watching this movie and I'm like, I don't know. Like I've only had like office job for like 15 months of my life. I watched this movie like 100 times before I ever had any of those jobs. I don't know what it is about this. I can't really articulate why I love it. I just think it's pound for pound the funniest movie maybe that's ever been made. I think every performance is perfect. I think every line is hilarious. I think there's not a weak link in here. I understand what you're saying, John, and I don't think you're wrong that the movie kind of peters out. I also think to a certain extent, like that's just what it is. Like, life doesn't end up in a nice little bow. Like it's just, you quit your job or you get fired and you get the same exact job at a different company. Like it's work, right? Like it's the same kind of thing. Like things don't wrap up nicely. Things don't wrap up neatly. Sometimes you go do a heroic thing and the heroic thing doesn't happen because the building burns down, maybe for real, maybe not, who knows?
Yeah.
But I just think it's so funny. I don't think there's really been a movie like this. And I think what we were talking about when we did Election, about like Election is the movie American Beauty wants to be. I think a lot of movies try to do this and I don't think they do it well. I think there's something that this captures, like a malaise and like an apathy, but like a kind, pure-hearted humanist, where like these are just real people who just like doing things but not the things that they have to do. And I think it's wonderful. And I think the whole Mike Judge thing of it all is just like he's just brilliant. So
yeah, I agree. And I will say that all of the criticisms I have of this movie and all the things I don't like about it, I don't think override the things that I love about it. And so when I tell people like you should see this movie, I don't say like, for me it peters out in the last 20 minutes. I like, that's fine. Everything that comes before that and everything that sort of the thesis of it and the ideas of it and the philosophy of it, I think are fantastic and still maybe even in a renewed way in this like post-COVID, or I hate to use that term, in this like
because we're still
COVID world that we live in.
No.
And, like,
Biden said it's over. The pandemic's done. We're
I know.
past it.
Okay, like I'll say the pandemic part is done. The COVID part's not. Like whatever, sure. But like in this world of like going back to the office and like, yeah, there's real relevance to it now, and I think that's pretty remarkable that 23 years later it still has both this very Y2K 1999 sort of like grounding, but still speaks to, unfortunately, the state of like late stage capitalism, which.
And I do, going back to what we were saying before about like, I don't like Freddy's Dead, and Jen's like, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you need to
It
like
wasn't
every
bad.
movie that I like. Like, I think if people like, I hate The Matrix, like, I get it. Like, that's not for everybody. If people like, I hate Office Space, like, I get it. It's not for everybody. But I also do think,
Fuck you.
to sum up my sense of humor, I think this is right there. And I think that if you like this, if you love this movie, I think we will get along.
Mhm.
I also think that
yeah.
one of my
Yeah.
favorite genres, even though it's not a genre, is the hangout movie. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite movie of all time might be Everybody Wants Some, which is just about a bunch of dudes on an 80s baseball team just hanging out.
It's like being singles. Like, it's right, exactly.
And like, there's
God,
nothing
I
like
love Singles so much.
Yeah.
kind of nothing happens in this movie.
Right, like in Singles.
It's just like,
Nothing
it's a slice of life. And I
hang
love
out.
that.
Yep, I
Like,
love it too.
it's
You're
an
sad when they're
anti-movie in a
gone.
way.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
100%. Yep. Totally with you.
So,
Jenn, before we go, do you want to sell yourself to the digital sphere?
You can find too many Jennifers in the places. My social media is private because I'm just sometimes
you're smart.
I lock it up.
Private?
It is right
Only
now.
I can
yeah.
see your social media.
Mhm.
That's
I lock it
cool.
up sometimes because I just need a little privacy for myself and my thoughts.
I mean, I respect that, but also like your social media is really fun.
Thank you. Well, if you follow me and I don't think you're an absolute weirdo, I'll say yes.
I mean, we're mostly Twitter friends.
I mean, I look at what you're replying to. I look at what you're liking. I look to see if you're a weird married guy who's just, I know why you're here, sir.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you in.
Yeah.
No, not you.
I feel you.
So just too many Jennifers, and that's all she wrote, I guess. And then I guess I'll see you again for Jawbreaker, which I'm also
oh my god, and
very
like
excited for, because I have a lot to say about Imperial Teen and the soundtrack to Jawbreaker. I have a lot to say about that.
Not to preview too much of what's coming in the future, but like Jawbreaker is likely to be in like our next round. So we are heading towards the last 3 movies of this round, and then we are doing something kind of fun and sort of fancy free for our next
John,
round.
are you saying that we're running toward our last 3? Are we doing 3 different versions of a run toward these last 3 movies?
We're doing one version of so it's 3 movies, not 3 versions of the same movie for our last 3.
Kind of like 3 attempts at a podcast
towards, and there will be no German.
Watch out for frogs.
Jenn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jenn.
After I forced you.
I can't wait to have you back. Joey, as always, watch out for frogs.
Watch out for frogs.
And we'll see you next time.
Working 9 to 5.